Chapter 1365. Light of the Sun. A dazzling light shone over this entire world. A frightening energy ripple was emitted from within the golden light. The Xian jade ruler in by Ruoxuan's hand was violently hacked down at the same time Xiao Yan swung the 7 feet of the ruler. A golden-colored dazzling glow shot out from the enormous ruler. It soared with the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed into a 1,000-foot-long startling glow. It hacked down toward Xiao Yan with a momentum that seemed to split the sky. At the same time, the 7 ruler glows that had been shot out from the heavy Xian ruler merged into one. The flame soared, and it became just like an incomparable sail that stood between the sky and the ground. It abruptly met the golden-colored glow that was shooting over from the bottom. In the next instant, boundless auras erupted like a volcano from the point of collision, blotting out the sky and covering the land. Cracking noises rang out as countless cracks spread across the surrounding ground and buildings, before they were completely destroyed with a loud bang. The invisible space cracked and formed numerous narrow, dark black crack lines under the collision of these two frightening energies. A monstrous energy wave spread over the sky. Although Xiao Yan was only 7 feet tall, the might of this 7 feet was far greater than in the past. Now that the 7-layered sky-breaking ruler had transformed into 9 feet, Xiao Yan was confident that he could completely block by Ruoxuan's attack even if he did not use his full strength. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion abruptly rang out at this moment. The battle between the two was completely destroyed at this moment, while the ground below was blasted into countless fragments that shot in all directions. Terrifying ripples from a punch swiftly spread at this moment, causing even Ouyang Miao and the rest, as well as the 2 elders from the 8-star origin sect, to involuntarily take a dozen steps back. They hurriedly circulated the Genesis Qi in their bodies, sealing off the area where the two had been. On the other side, Bai Rong's sinister eyes stared intently at the unmoving Xiao Yan. Killing intent surged in the depths of his eyes as the Genesis Qi in his body stealthily flowed to his palm. Swish! Within the battle circle, the energy storm had yet to completely dissipate. Just as everyone was feeling anxious, a violent sound of rushing wind suddenly rang out from within. Almost at the same time, Bai Rong's body, who was outside the battle circle, also trembled. Only a gradually blurred afterimage was left on his original spot. However, his body had already appeared beside Bai Ruoxuan. Just as he was about to raise his hand and throw a palm forward, his expression suddenly changed drastically. At the same time, his body turned around and violently threw a palm towards the empty space on the other side. Boom! 2 skinny palms came into contact with each other in the invisible empty space. Energy ripples spread out like a hurricane. At the same time, the energy ripples in the surroundings were completely swept away. At the same time, the low and deep sound of another fist landing on the body was also transmitted into Bai Rong's ears. After which, everyone present clearly saw a white figure fly out from the battle circle like a kite with a broken string. After which, it violently landed on the ground. It rubbed against the ground for dozens of meters before it slowly stabilized. If one looked again, this person was undoubtedly Bai Ruoxuan. At this moment, 3 human figures were standing in each direction in the empty space. Xiao Yan stood in the middle while 2 old men stood opposite each other. Their gazes were staring at Xiao Yan alone in the middle of the battleground. This was especially the case for Bai Rong at this moment. The expression on his old face was gloomy. He did not expect that there would actually be someone who would intervene on Xiao Yan's behalf. Moreover, from the looks of the other party's aura earlier, it was likely that the other party's cultivation was not inferior to his. Damn it! Bai Rong turned his head to look at Bai Ruoxuan, who was in the middle of the ruins and had almost fainted. The expression on Bai Rong's face was extremely ugly. Then, he suddenly turned his head to look at Xiao Yan and laughed angrily. I never thought that you would have a helper. Hearing those words, Xiao Yan could not help but raise his eyebrows. He turned his head to look at the other side. At this moment, an old man wearing a purple robe with a face full of wrinkles was similarly standing in the air. However, looking at his expression that was filled with killing intent, Xiao Yan did not think that this fellow would be his helper. Humph, helper? If you had not intervened to stop me, this brat would have already died under this venerable self's palm. Soon after, the old man in purple robes let out a hoarse and dark cold snort. Bai Rong's expression could not help but be slightly startled when he heard these words. From the other party's tone, it seemed that he had also come to kill Xiao Yan. Things had happened so suddenly that he had misunderstood the other party's intentions. Immediately, He heaved a long sigh of relief in his heart. His gaze bypassed Xiao Yan and stared at the purple-robed elder. He raised his hand and cupped his fist together as he faintly smiled. So it was a misunderstanding. This old man has been overthinking things. In that case, please do as you wish. Bai Rong swiftly descended to Bai Ruoxuan's side after uttering those words. The two 8-star Sorsong had already helped Bai Ruoxuan consume medicinal pills. Although Bai Ruoxuan's injuries were temporarily stabilized, the killing intent in Bai Rong's eyes became even denser when he saw the deep, scarlet fist imprint on Bai Ruoxuan's chest. He turned his head and looked at the solemn expression of Xiao Yan in the sky. If Bai Ruoxuan's injuries were not too serious, it was likely that he would have personally attacked. When he looked at the empty space again, the purple-robed elder who had suddenly appeared was currently looking at Xiao Yan with a face full of killing intent. A powerful aura continuously surged from his body, appearing rather shocking. Where did you provoke such an expert? Yang Miao's body rushed forward and appeared beside Xiao Yan. He had quite a good understanding of the Bai clan, but he had never seen this purple-robed person in front of him. Naturally, he did not dare to carelessly speak. I have never seen him before. Xiao Yan frowned when he heard this and explained in a deep voice. Yang Miao frowned in surprise when he heard this. However, at this moment, the purple-robed man spoke again. His hoarse voice was like an invisible blade that spread across the world. You don't recognize this old man, but you should remember Xie Shan, right? When the two words Xie Shan were spoken, an extremely terrifying aura and pressure suddenly swept out from the old man's body. It instantly enveloped Xiao Yan and Yang Miao's heads. Xie Shan. Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows. Subsequently, he suddenly raised his head and cried out in surprise. You are a member of the Sky Poison Dragon Scorpion Beast clan. This sovereign is Xie Shan's father. You killed Xie Shan in the southern region. Do you really think that no one will know? Today, this sovereign will use your blood to pay tribute to my dead son. An earth-shaking furious cry was emitted. The body of the purple-robed old man suddenly shook. His body instantly turned into a purple-colored light figure that shot explosively toward Xiao Yan in the sky in front of the solemn gazes of Yang Miao and the others. A sharp roar also shook the sky. At this moment, the white array disc that Xiao Yan was holding tightly in his hand also emitted a golden light. Immediately after, it was thrown into the air. At the same time the array was activated, numerous spiritual stones also flew out from Xiao Yan's storage ring. Chapter 1366. That purple-robed person appeared outside of the formation. Almost at the same time the formation above Xiao Yan's head was activated. Soon after, a palm was heavily imprinted on the golden-colored barrier in front of him. Clang! Circular golden-colored energy ripples swiftly spread from the formation barrier. At the same time the trembling sound appeared. The remaining strength of the rebound also forced the purple-robed person back by over 100 feet. By the time he raised his head, the formation had already been fully unleashed, covering Xiao Yan and Yang Miao within it. A grade 7 array? The purple-robed man's brows knitted together as his expression darkened. With a flip of his hand, chilling blood-colored Genesis Chi rapidly gathered in his palm. With a vicious wave, it transformed into a stream of light that slammed into the array barrier. Ripples churned, but it remained incomparably tough. Not bad. I didn't expect you to possess such a high-grade array. But what can a mere grade 7 array do in front of me? With an icy chuckle, the purple-robed man was about to charge forward again when Yang Miao suddenly took a step forward, frowning as he respectfully said, Elder, I am the heir of the Yang clan, Yang Miao. I don't care what grudges you have with Xiao Yan, but I hope you can stop today and treat it as giving my Yang clan some face. Humph, I haven't been to the central region for many years. How did such an arrogant junior emerge? The Yang family is one of the 3 great clans of the central region and has Sword Saint Yulan as their leader. I have heard of your reputation, but why should I give you any face when you're just a junior? As his voice faded, the purple-robed man's figure had already appeared in front of the array barrier. Murderous intent surged in his eyes as he slammed his palm into the array barrier. Unlike before, the purple-robed man's figure did not retreat in the slightest. As his palm landed, ripples churned on the array barrier, followed by another palm strike. The entire array gradually began to tremble under his powerful attacks. Within the array barrier, Xiao Yan stared intently at the purple-robed man's astonishing attacks as his heart turned solemn. Even if a source venerate expert did not use any DO skills, he could still rely on his own power to shatter a grade 7 array. Although the array barrier was strong, it would not last long under the purple-robed man's attacks. As his heart sank, Xiao Yan had no choice but to quickly circulate the Genesis Chi in his body. Flames surged in his palm, swiftly forming a flaming wheel as wisps of great Tao power gathered. In the face of a source venerate expert, the only thing Xiao Yan could rely on was the angry Buddha reincarnation, which was comparable to a great Tao skill. Outside, Bai Rong could not help but reveal a sinister smile when he saw the grave expression on Xiao Yan's face. It had to be said that the fact that Xiao Yan had been able to easily defeat the 4-star Bai Ruoxuan with his 2-star origin ancestor cultivation was partly due to Bai Ruoxuan's carelessness, but Xiao Yan's frightening battle power was also undeniable. Today's battle between Xiao Yan and Bai Ruoxuan had turned them into true enemies regardless of whether it was the mysterious Jade Ruler or the fact that Xiao Yan had heavily injured Bai Ruoxuan. If not for the purple-robed man's intervention earlier, Xiao Yan would likely have already become a dead soul under his palm. Of course, doing so would definitely incur the displeasure of the Ouyang clan. However, the purple-robed man's intervention had saved Bai Rong a lot of trouble. Today, this kid will die without a doubt. The smile on Bai Rong's lips widened as he watched the increasingly crumbling golden formation under the purple-robed man's fierce attacks. Clang 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 clang. A series of heavy bangs rang out as tiny cracks quietly appeared on the white jade formation disc hovering in front of Xiao Yan. From the looks of it, it would not last for long, and the angry Buddha reincarnation in his palm would likely take some time to gather. Xiao Yan had no choice but to desperately gather the Genesis Chi in his body. The angry Buddha reincarnation was his greatest trump card at this moment. By the side, Ouyang Miao's expression grew increasingly dark. When he saw that the formation was about to collapse, he shouted in a low voice, "Even if you don't give this junior face today, you should stop for the sake of my Ouyang clan. Otherwise, this matter won't end so easily in the future." He boy, your words are a little arrogant. It is indeed the style of the Ouyang clan, but my purpose today is only to kill this boy. It has nothing to do with your Ouyang clan. If you attack, don't blame me for being merciless. Boom! At the same time that the cold cry was emitted from his mouth, a shriveled hand of the purple-robed person finally violently penetrated the formation barrier in front of him. After which, his arm shook abruptly. Soon after, the golden-colored formation barrier in front of him swiftly broke apart amidst a wave of cracking sounds. Even the white jade formation plate that was suspended in front of Xiao Yan similarly trembled intensely. Soon after, it actually broke apart in the air, transforming into a pile of powder that scattered and drifted down. Xiao Yan's expression changed drastically when the formation broke. The purple-robed man let out a sinister laugh. He twisted his right hand, his 5 fingers curling into a claw. His body immediately dashed forward, grabbing at Xiao Yan's throat. At almost the same time, Xiao Yan's side, Ouyang Miao also moved after a brief moment of hesitation. He blocked in front of Xiao Yan while the Genesis Chi in his body gushed out without reservation. His right hand grasped the air, and an ink-colored spear appeared in his hand. As water flowed around the tip of the spear, a curtain of water adhered to the spear. Next, he thrust the spear forward with a grave expression. "Don't blame me for being stubborn." Seeing this, the purple-robed man's face darkened. With a slight twist of his wrist, the claw that was rushing forward immediately changed direction and grabbed at the long spear that was thrusting towards him. However, when the two of them were less than 10 feet apart, the space between them suddenly distorted violently. Immediately after, an incomparably terrifying light burst forth like a storm. While it easily pushed the purple-robed man back, Ouyang Miao's body and the spear in his hand were forcefully frozen in the air, unable to move at all. When this unparalleled sharpness gradually dissipated, what fell into everyone's line of sight was a long sword suspended in the void. When everyone saw the sword, the members of the Bai clan, as well as Xiao Yan's group, could not help but reveal shocked expressions. There was naturally no need to mention the Bai clan. As for Xiao Yan's group, although the sword was much smaller in size, the runes on it and the sharp aura it gave off were no different from the giant sword outside St. Gold City. It was the Serene Orchid Sword. The appearance of the Serene Orchid Sword meant that its master should be here. Chapter 1367. This is the Serene Orchid Sword. On the ground below, Bai Rong's eyes suddenly shrunk when he saw the sharp long sword suspended in the air. Even the expression on his old face changed. In his heart, he involuntarily cursed the purple-robed person. If this fellow had not disregarded the face of the Ouyang clan and attacked Ouyang Miao, the serene orchid sword might not have appeared in this place. Now that the serene orchid sword had appeared and Ouyang Miao was protecting Xiao Yan, it was naturally impossible for this purple-robed person to kill Xiao Yan. Humph! This is the serene orchid sword? Rumor has it that the Ouyang clan has a serene orchid sword saint who once fought against 3 origin venerables by himself. Today, I would like to experience it. The purple-robed man narrowed his eyes as he stared at the space beside the serene orchid sword. Hee, I wouldn't dare to experience it. I only hope that your excellency will stop. Everyone who comes is a guest and my Ouyang clan should treat them with respect. I didn't wish for things to turn out this way. Why don't your excellency give me some face and let bygones be bygones? After the purple-robed man finished speaking, the space he was looking at gradually distorted. Then, a middle-aged man in green clothes appeared with his hands behind his back and a warm smile on his face as he looked at the purple-robed man not far away. At the same time, Ouyang Miao, who was behind him, gradually withdrew his tyrannical aura into his body. Even the energy condensed on the long spear was absorbed into Ouyang Miao's body. His stiff body suddenly returned to normal. The middle-aged man in green clothes had a handsome figure. He wore a crown on his head and had a resolute face. A pair of sword-like eyebrows made him look majestic without being angry. His pitch-black eyes contained a sharp light like that of an eagle's. If he hadn't deliberately restrained it, few people would have been able to look him in the eye. This person was the second in command of the Ouyang clan, known as the Serene Orchid Sword Saint, Ouyang Yu. Humph, I'll give you some face. As long as you hand him over, I will immediately turn around and leave. The purple-robed man pointed at Xiao Yan as he spoke with a sinister smile. The bloodthirsty killing intent in his eyes was not concealed in the slightest. Ouyang Miao's expression changed the moment these words were spoken. His footsteps shifted slightly to the side and blocked in front of Xiao Yan. His gaze, however, landed on the middle-aged man in front of him. The latter turned his head and smiled at Ouyang Miao. His gaze swept past Xiao Yan's face before he turned around and once again looked at the purple-robed person. He smiled slightly and slowly shook his head. My apologies. This little friend is also a guest of the Ouyang clan. Since he is in the clan, how can I not take care of him? I hope your excellency can forgive me. The purple-robed man's expression immediately darkened. The Genesis chi in his body churned as he spoke in a low voice. You're not giving it to me? Please forgive me. Ouyang's eyes. Chi. The moment the middle-aged man finished speaking, the purple-robed man's figure instantly charged forward. The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. The short distance between the two of them was closed in an instant. The purple-robed man's 5 fingers curled into a claw and grabbed the middle-aged man's chest. I'd like to see just how capable a sword saint like you is. The curved claw tore a pitch-black crack in the void. Powerful energy gathered between the 5 fingers, wrapped in a fierce wind, and stabbed fiercely at the middle-aged man's chest. If this attack landed, even with Ouyang Yu's cultivation, he would be seriously injured in an instant. Bzz. However, just as the sharp claws were a meter away from Ouyang Yu's body, the serene orchid sword hovering in the air seemed to have sensed something and instantly arrived in front of Ouyang Yu. The 3-finger-wide sword firmly blocked the purple-robed man's attack. What? The purple-robed man was shocked. His attack was easily blocked by the long sword, and Ouyang Yu didn't even make a move. He was still looking at him with a calm expression. Then, with a thought, a fierce and domineering sword chi suddenly burst out from the sword and fiercely fell on the purple-robed man's palm. With a burst of sparks, a stream of blood spilled out. The purple-robed man was immediately sent flying. He lowered his head to look, only to see a scarlet sword scar on his palm. The intense pain caused his entire arm to tremble uncontrollably, while the muscles on his face twitched violently. Fortunately, he had his Genesis chi to block the attack, or his hand would have been severed by the sword chi. What a terrifying sword chi! The purple-robed man's expression darkened as he muttered under his breath. He could not help but feel a grave feeling in his heart. I hope you can stop here. Ouyang Yu smiled faintly. His smile was as simple and calm as before, but it was exceptionally pressuring. Behind him, Xiao Yan could not help but sigh inwardly when he saw the middle-aged man's calm appearance. Ouyang Yu had already displayed such powerful battle strength before even making a move. Even the purple-robed man, who was a Genesis Venerate, had been forced to retreat. It was hard to imagine how terrifying Ouyang Yu would be once he displayed his true cultivation. Sword Saint Yulan indeed lived up to her reputation. The purple-robed man's expression fluctuated indeterminately when he heard Ouyang Yu's words. Xie Shan's death had made him extremely sad, and he had even sworn to avenge his dead son. But now, his enemy was right in front of him, and he was helpless to do anything. How could he endure this? A pair of dark red eyes stared intently at Xiao Yan. A long while later, the purple-robed man gritted his teeth and unwillingly lowered his head. He said in a low voice, "I've lost." Although this was what he said, when he lowered his head, an extremely strong resentment abruptly emerged in his old eyes. Ouyang Yu raised his eyelids and nodded slightly. Hearing this, Ouyang Miao's hanging heart finally calmed down. However, in the next moment, "I admit that I'm no match for you, and I can admit defeat. But this brat must die." The purple-robed man abruptly lifted his head as his body abruptly shook. Genesis Chi frantically gushed out from his body as a powerful aura spread outwards. It was an astonishing sight to behold. On the ground below, Bai Rong's expression could not help but change slightly when he felt the powerful aura from the purple-robed man's body. Although the purple-robed man's attitude was domineering, he had the ability to back it up. He was a 3-star Genesis Venerate, and his cultivation was much stronger than Bai Rong's. Genesis Chi surged. Borrowing the time when everyone present was shocked, the purple-robed person's body suddenly flashed. He swiftly passed Ouyang Yu and shot toward Xiao Yan. "Brat! Hand over your life." Chapter 1368. The expressions on Bai Hua's and Lian Er's faces changed drastically as they watched the purple-robed person charge toward Xiao Yan in a lightning-like manner. However, the purple-robed person had already arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Even if they wanted to intervene and stop him, it was too late. Even Ouyang Miao, who was standing around 10 feet in front of Xiao Yan, did not have the time to do anything. Given the full speed of an Origin Venerate expert, it was impossible for them to do anything. The purple-robed man arrived in front of Xiao Yan at lightning speed with a sinister smile on his face. He clenched his hand, and boundless Genesis Chi immediately condensed into a layer of energy crystals that transformed into a giant claw. He clenched his hand and viciously swiped at Xiao Yan's body. On the ground below, Bai Rong sneered inwardly at Ouyang Miao's ignorance as he watched the scene in the sky. Ouyang Miao had been famous in the central region for many years, and his strength was naturally not to be underestimated. If Ouyang Miao thought that he could avoid Ouyang Miao with just this, he was underestimating Sword Saint Yolan's reputation. At the same time, Xiao Yan also sensed the purple-robed man's attack with his extraordinary senses. The moment the giant claw appeared, Xiao Yan didn't wait for it to lock onto him. Instead, his feet moved, and his figure immediately retreated. "Humph!" The purple-robed man sneered when he saw Xiao Yan's quick reaction. His laughter had just sounded when the expression on Xiao Yan's face suddenly changed. All he could sense was a blur in front of his eyes. A huge claw that was filled with an enormous pressure once again strangely appeared. After which, it clawed down with lightning-like speed. Even the space around Xiao Yan solidified at this moment. Xiao Yan's expression changed when the surrounding space froze. His body was blocked. The giant energy claw was too troublesome, and even dodging it was extremely difficult. An Origin Venerate expert was indeed extraordinary. Numerous thoughts flashed across Xiao Yan's heart as he suddenly clenched his teeth. His dark black eyes stared intently at the huge claw that was viciously grabbing at him with a sharp wind. The remaining Genesis Chi in his body crazily surged out. At the same time, the fire wheel that had gathered in his hand behind him began to violently rotate. A dark black star emitted a destructive aura from the center of the wheel. He was ready to go all out against the purple-robed man. Ouyang Yu, who had already sensed the activity on Xiao Yan's side, suddenly knit his brows together when the roulette wheel in Xiao Yan's hand began to rotate wildly. The aura emitted from the roulette wheel might be weak, but with his senses, he was able to clearly sense it. Immediately, he felt some surprise in his heart. At the same time, the enormous claw rushed toward Xiao Yan. It immediately spread open, appearing just like a ghost claw as it grabbed toward Xiao Yan's head from the air. As the giant claw grew larger and larger in his eyes, Xiao Yan's expression turned completely grave. He abruptly lifted the hand behind his back, and the Buddha's Fury reincarnation wheel frantically rotated in his palm. Heaven and earth energy gathered as he prepared to use all his strength. However, just as Xiao Yan lifted his hand, the space in front of him suddenly distorted strangely. Soon after, Ouyang Yu's figure emerged from the distorted space and stood in front of Xiao Yan. Bas! Almost at the same time when Ouyang Yu's figure appeared, a vast and steady aura suddenly surged out from within his body. Immediately, it swept out like a storm. Sharp sword chi swept out with Ouyang Yu's body as the center. Above his head, the invisible sword chi condensed into a faintly discernible giant sword, protecting Ouyang Yu's entire body. An extremely terrifying aura and pressure also spread out without reservation. It felt as if the person standing in front of him was not a person, but a towering sword. On the ground below, when Bai Rong and the others beside him felt this aura and pressure, their expressions changed drastically. Even with Bai Rong's temperament, his heart was also filled with shock at this moment. This guy broke through to 8-star? Sword Saint Yulan, Ouyang Yu, was a supreme expert who had reached 8-star source venerate. Your Excellency has repeatedly offended my Ouyang family, so don't blame me for not showing mercy. The moment Ouyang Yu's body appeared, a somewhat indifferent icy cold voice was transmitted over. Quickly following this, the former placed two of his fingers together in front of Xiao Yan's stunned gaze and pierced forward without any fancy moves. After which, it pressed against the huge claw that was attacking him head-on. Bas! A ray of white light suddenly flashed, and the face of the purple-robed man behind the huge claw instantly changed drastically. His figure hurriedly retreated, and the huge claw suddenly exploded in the next moment, turning into a large energy storm that swept out once again. At the same time, an incomparably sharp sword chi narrowly swept past the temples of the purple-robed man, cutting off half of his hair bun. This was all thanks to his timely reaction. Otherwise, what would have been cut off would not only be his hair bun. The purple-robed man hurriedly retreated until he was dozens of feet away before he slowly stabilized his body. At the same time, he felt the powerful aura and pressure emitted from Ouyang Yu's body, and his face immediately turned ugly. An 8-star source venerate. With such a cultivation, there were very few opponents in the Origin Venerate realm. Although he was also an Origin Venerate expert, compared to Ouyang Yu in front of him, he was undoubtedly a small child in the presence of a great one. He had not felt anything before, but now that Ouyang Yu had released the aura and pressure from his body, the gap between the two of them was obvious. With just 2 fingers and a sword, Ouyang Yu had easily broken the ghost claw condensed by him. It was obvious that Ouyang Yu's battle strength was extraordinary. At this time, if he continued to delay, he would lose more than just face. The purple-robed man's gaze swept across the pedestrians gradually gathering in the distance. His face was gloomy, and his gaze swept over Xiao Yan unwillingly. His eyes flickered rapidly, and after a long while, he bitterly gritted his teeth and coldly shouted at Xiao Yan with a vicious gaze. "Kid, you're lucky. Brat, consider yourself lucky this time. The next time we meet, I will definitely make you pay a painful price." A cold light flashed in Xiao Yan's eyes as he sneered. "I'll keep you company." Humph. Hearing this, the purple-robed man's old face could not help but twitch slightly. Immediately after, his cold gaze swept across the crowd, and he clenched his fists unwillingly. After a while, he finally decided not to do this useless thing. With a twist of his body, he quickly flew out of St. Gold City. "Kid, we will meet again." After the figure left, a cold cry drifted over from the distant sky. After which, it slowly reverberated in the sky. Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes, and a sharp light flashed in the depths of his pitch-black eyes. Chapter 1369. Xiao Yan slowly exhaled as he watched the purple-robed person's figure gradually disappear from his sight. He scattered the fire wheel in his hand. Now, he had finally escaped from this old monster. However, from the looks of it, the latter clearly did not wish to give up so easily. If they were to meet in the future, a true life-and-death battle would unavoidably erupt between the two of them. However, it was still unknown just what level Xiao Yan's cultivation would reach at that time. On the ground below, the light in the eyes of Bai Rong and the others could not help but dim slightly when they saw the purple-robed man turn around and leave. They originally wanted to use this opportunity to get rid of Xiao Yan, but who would have thought that things would turn out like this? They could not help but snort coldly and help Bai Ruoxuan, who had already woken up. At the same time, Xiao Yan, who was in the sky, withdrew his eyes. They swept around and immediately gathered at a certain spot on the ground below. There was an enormous ruler that was as white as jade inserted into a pile of rock fragments at an angle. It was the mysterious jade ruler. With the end of the battle, this thing should be his spoils of victory. Xiao Yan immediately smiled. He extended his hand and beckoned. An invisible strength immediately spread out and swiftly wrapped around the Xian jade ruler. After which, it was pulled out from the rock fragments and shot toward Xiao Yan. "Boy, how dare you!" The expression on Bai Rong's face instantly changed when he saw the Xian jade ruler flying toward Xiao Yan. He waved his sleeve and a suction force surged from his palm. Immediately, he forcefully sucked the Xian jade ruler, which had rushed into the air, over. After which, he held it tightly in his hand. At the same time, he lifted his gaze and stared at Xiao Yan with a dark and solemn face. Xiao Yan's expression could not help but change slightly when the mysterious jade ruler was blocked. He immediately frowned and said in a deep voice, "What? You dare to bet but don't dare to lose? As a member of the Bai clan, you actually went back on your words and went back on your word. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by the world? Boy, you have a sharp tongue. It was clearly you who launched a sneak attack first. If not for that, how could you be a match for my young master with your strength as a 2-star origin sect master?" Bai Rong's expression immediately turned cold when he heard this, and he sneered. Bullshit. In the previous battle, Bai Ruoxuan was no match for Xiao Yan at all. Not to mention that his battle strength was superficial. Just the fact that he underestimated his opponent was enough to kill him. Hearing Bai Rong's words, Yang Miao, who was in the void, immediately became gloomy. He could not help but scold Bai Rong's words, and his words made Bai Rong's expression. Bai Rong's old face turned red, but at the same time, he still tried to argue. So what? This Xiao Yan made use of my clan's heir to underestimate him. Today's battle will not count. If you want to fight, send out a challenge. In the future, let's have a fair fight in the Bai clan. When Bai Rong said this, some of the passers-by who had been attracted to the scene couldn't help but sneer. Although they didn't know much about what had happened on the battlefield, they found Bai Rong's words to be a little too ridiculous. Many people present had experienced the Bai clan's shamelessness. This so-called fair fight might be fine if it was in public, but if it was in the Bai clan, how could it be fair when it was the entire Bai clan fighting against a single person? Yang Miao naturally understood this. His gaze was extremely disgusted as it violently swept over Bai Rong's shriveled old face. He was just about to open his mouth when Yang Yu by the side suddenly frowned and voiced his doubts. Only then did Yang Miao briefly explain the fight and bet between Xiao Yan and Bai Ruoxuan earlier. What did you say? Dark heavy buster sword. However, Yang Miao's eyebrows were suddenly lifted just as Yang Miao was explaining. It was as though he had heard something unbelievable as he let out a soft cry. At the same time, Yang Yu's gaze landed on Xiao Yan with a swoosh sound. There was an unusual glint deep within his eyes. Xiao Yan was first taken aback when he felt Yang Yu's gaze. Soon after, he could not help but shiver inwardly. With a thought, he stealthily circulated the Genesis Qi in his body through his meridians. Just in case, he would be able to provide support. Yang Miao also felt a wave of surprise in his heart when he saw the former's usually calm face reveal such a surprised expression. However, before he could ask, Yang Yu's gaze turned towards Bai Rong and the others below. His gaze swept over the few of them. Finally, it stopped on Bai Ruoxuan, who was looking at him with a surprised expression. After hesitating for a moment, he slowly said, "Ruoxuan, I know that you are unwilling to accept this, but victory and defeat are inevitable in a battle. Since you were the one who requested to fight first and there was a bet, you should accept your loss. At most you can win it back in the future. I'm afraid that your actions today will damage the clan's reputation." But, just as Bai Ruoxuan was about to struggle, Yang Yu's next words instantly caused light to explode in his eyes, and even disbelief. "If you want to become my disciple, you absolutely cannot go back on your words. Do you understand?" Yang Yu frowned slightly, seemingly questioning Bai Ruoxuan. Joy immediately surged onto Bai Ruoxuan's pale face. Didn't Yang Yu mean that he was willing to accept him as his disciple? If that was the case, even if the mysterious jade ruler was temporarily in Xiao Yan's hands, it would be as easy as flipping his hand to take it back once he had mastered it. With this thought in mind, the light in Bai Ruoxuan's eyes grew even brighter as he hurriedly bowed towards Yang Yu with the help of the 2 8-star origin sect disciples. However, Bai Rong frowned as he supported Bai Ruoxuan and said in a low voice, isn't this a little? Shut up. It's just a useless weapon, so what if we lose it? But if the clan leader blames us, I will naturally explain it to father. Now give it to me. Bai Ruoxuan's expression darkened as he slowly extended his hand towards Bai Rong. The latter could not help but grit his teeth as hesitation filled his old face. It was only when Bai Ruoxuan was about to act out again that he finally handed over the mysterious jade ruler. A familiar icy sensation immediately spread to Bai Ruoxuan's palm as the ruler entered his hand. A look of reluctance flitted across his eyes as he gazed at the giant ruler that had accompanied him for many years. Soon after, he steeled himself and raised both hands, waiting for Ouyang-Yu's decision. Teacher, please make your decision. Yes, your Genesis Chi is of the metal attribute, making it extremely sharp. This mysterious jade ruler is too heavy and does not suit you. I will find another suitable weapon for you in the future. Ouyang-Yu nonchalantly said. After the latter respectfully expressed his thanks, he nodded and looked towards Xiao Yan with a faint smile. Young friend Xiao Yan, this mysterious jade ruler is yours from now on. Please. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan could not help but gratefully cup his hands together towards Ouyang-Yu. Soon after, his eyes burned with desire as he looked towards the mysterious jade ruler in Bai Ruoxuan's hand. He smiled faintly as he beckoned with his hand. A suction force surged from his palm as the mysterious jade ruler was sucked into his hand. After a simple inspection, he stored it in his storage ring. Chapter 1370. Seeing that the mysterious jade ruler had landed in Xiao Yan's hands, the pale-faced Bai Ruoxuan below involuntarily revealed a vicious expression in his eyes. However, with Ouyang-Yu in front of him, he could only temporarily suppress this hatred in his heart. While he was cursing in his heart, a feeling of weakness was suddenly emitted from his body. Previously, he had received a heavy punch from Xiao Yan. The power of the punch was so great that it had instantly caused him to be seriously injured. Fortunately, he had the protection of the medicinal pill, which allowed him to remain unscathed. At this moment, the medicinal pill's remaining power in his body had been exhausted. That kind of pain once again attacked his heart. Seeing this, an old man by the side hurriedly helped him consume another healing medicinal pill. After the medicinal effect spread throughout his body, his complexion finally turned slightly better. In the sky, Ouyang Miao frowned as he looked at Bai Ruoxuan and the others below. His eyes were filled with disgust. After the previous matter, he originally did not have a good impression of these fellows. However, at this moment, Ouyang-Yu had personally spoken. Thus, he naturally did not say anything. Moreover, a discerning person would naturally be able to tell that Ouyang-Yu's actions were mostly biased towards Xiao Yan's wishes. This point caused him to feel a wave of disbelief. In the past, Ouyang-Yu had never bothered with Bai Ruoxuan. Today, he was actually suddenly willing to accept him as a disciple. This was truly an unimaginable matter. With this thought in his mind, Ouyang Miao involuntarily turned his gaze towards Xiao Yan. His eyes revealed some suspicion. Just what was so special about this fellow that even Ouyang-Yu, who had just met him for the first time, was biased towards him? Could it be because of the heavenly flame? Ouyang Miao raised his eyebrows slightly. Immediately, he secretly shook his head. He had never revealed the matter of the heavenly flame to Ouyang-Yu. Therefore, Ouyang-Yu naturally did not know about it. At that moment, after thinking bitterly for a moment, he helplessly shrugged his shoulders and once again returned his gaze to Ouyang-Yu. At the same time, Ouyang-Yu's gaze once again returned to Bai Ruoxuan. Seeing the latter's condition, Ouyang-Yu's gaze swept over him indifferently. All right, that's all for now. Ruoxuan's injuries aren't light. Come with me first. As for the others, I'll leave Shui Miao to you. Ouyang Miao respectfully nodded upon hearing this. Joy immediately surfaced on Bai Ruoxuan's face when she heard this. She hurriedly maneuvered the remaining Genesis Chi in her body and swiftly followed after Ouyang-Yu as he turned around and headed deeper into Golden Saint City. Behind him, Bai Rong's brows were tightly knitted together. His eyes took a deep look at Xiao Yan in the sky, and he coldly snorted before following. Not far away, Bai Hua and Lian also came to Xiao Yan's side. The three of them looked at Ouyang-Ming in unison. The game with him was probably over for the time being. Next, they should prepare to head to the Xiao clan. Just as the few of them were about to move, Bai Ruoxuan, who had brushed past Xiao Yan, suddenly spoke in a low and cold voice. Xiao Yan, right? I'll leave the mysterious jade ruler in your hands for the time being. There will come a day when I will make you kneel and return it to me. The expressions of Bai Hua and Lian Er by the side immediately turned cold when these words were uttered. Xiao Yan, however, smiled in a non-committal manner. I'll wait for you to come and get it. Bai Ruoxuan's expression immediately darkened. Just as he was about to speak again, Ouyang Yu suddenly frowned and growled. Only then did Bai Ruoxuan's expression change as he hurriedly chased after Ouyang Yu with a smile. Although there was a smile on his face, the depths of his eyes contained a sinister anger. From the looks of it, he would have charged over if Ouyang Yu had not been in front of him. Xiao Yan smiled faintly, as if he did not sense the hostility hidden deep within Bai Ruoxuan's eyes. He turned his head and glanced at Ouyang Miao, who was flying over from the side. The latter gave a slight nod before shooting a glance at Bai Ruoxuan, who was swiftly leaving, and coldly snorted. It's just a slip of the tongue. There's no need to bother about him. Xiao Yan smiled and shook his head. If he had to care about such a small matter, it was likely that he would not have reached where he was today. Xiao Yan involuntarily shrugged his shoulders as he looked at the ruined street. Ouyang Miao smiled faintly and indicated to Xiao Yan that he was fine. Soon after, he led the three of them in the direction of the teleportation formation. A moment later, this group of people arrived at a square in the middle of Holy Gold City. Following their arrival, the eyes of quite a number of people in the square gathered on Xiao Yan's group. As the successor of the Ouyang clan, Ouyang Miao's identity was naturally known by everyone in Golden Saint City. Apart from the disciples of a few ancient clans and sects, only a few of the more famous younger generation in the central region would be able to walk with him. However, the three people before him were not included among those people. Let alone the black-robed young man. Just the other two had not even reached the Origin King level. If they were placed in the central region, no one would even remember their faces. However, they were able to stand together with Ouyang Miao at this moment, which inevitably surprised many people. However, the doubtful gazes of everyone present quickly turned into shock under the revelation of some people who were in the know. This was especially the case when they learned that even Bai Ruoxuan from the Bai clan had suffered at the hands of Xiao Yan. Quite a number of people revealed gloating expressions on their faces. Clearly, they did not have a good impression of the people from the Bai clan. 3 large-scale teleportation formations. As expected of one of the 3 great clans. This kind of extravagance is rarely seen. Xiao Yan involuntarily inhaled a gentle breath of air as he looked at the large square in front of him, especially the enormous teleportation formation that was being repeatedly rotated under waves of golden light. At this moment, there was a dazzling light flickering on the teleportation formation. The outer layer of the teleportation formation was covered by a solid formation barrier that blocked all the energy ripples within it. In this way, it would be able to reduce the exhaustion of energy. At the same time, it would also be able to prevent the trouble of a sudden attack. As the formation barrier dissipated, dozens of people walked out from within the great formation. Soon after, people stepped into the formation one after another. This is only a teleportation formation that my Ouyang clan built. When we reach deeper into the central region, there will be teleportation formations that are even more powerful than this. A rank 7 teleportation formation is not small, but it is not big either. Hearing this, Ouyang Miao smiled indifferently. This open ground, which was extremely shocking in the eyes of most people, was clearly much dimmer in the eyes of this heir. Xiao Yan could only smile and nod his head in response. He did not say anything more. After all, one's position was different, so naturally, one would see different things. The Ouyang clan was one of the superpowers in the continent. As the crown prince, Ouyang Miao's horizons were naturally greater than others. Xiao Yan admitted that he was new to this place, but it was only a matter of time before he understood the vast central region. Let's go. The group arrived in front of the teleportation formation. After exchanging a few words with Ouyang Miao, they directly stepped into the formation. Because of Ouyang Miao, they were spared the trouble of paying spirit stones. After Xiao Yan and the other two stepped into the formation, Ouyang Miao and Ouyang Miao smiled at each other and nodded. Soon after, on a stone platform outside the teleportation formation, an old man who was controlling the formation formed a seal with both hands. As a special energy ripple spread out, a layer of golden formation enveloped the entire stone platform. Soon after, the huge formation beneath Xiao Yan and the others emitted a bright golden light. When the light gradually grew brighter and covered everyone's bodies, the teleportation formation was completely activated. The figures on the square disappeared from St. Gold City. Chapter 1371. Tianyang City was one of the 3 largest subordinate cities of the Shao clan. At the same time, it was also the last transit point for Xiao Yan to head to the Shao clan. Once he reached this place, he would truly arrive at the territory of the Shao clan. Xiao Yan looked at the human flow in front of him, which was clearly much sparser compared to Holy Gold City. He involuntarily sighed in his heart. Although they were both part of the 3 great clans, the gap between them was completely revealed at this moment. Forget about everything else. Even in the entire Shao clan, it seemed that this Tianyang City was the only place that possessed a rank 7 transportation formation. Ugh! Xiao Yan let out an inexplicable sigh. Soon after, his eyes scanned his surroundings and landed on an old man in linen robes. The old man was seated on an independent stone platform. His face was sallow and his old eyes were tightly shut. His entire body was as still as a stone statue. If it were not for his steady breathing, he would have been mistaken for a dead person. Just like St. Gold City, this old man was in charge of controlling the operation of the teleportation array. Xiao Yan smiled slightly. He led Bai Hua by the side and took a couple of steps forward. He respectfully bowed to the old man before immediately speaking in a respectful manner. May I ask Elder to tell me where the Shao clan is? Although the 3 of them had already arrived at the territory of the Shao clan, the map that they had brought did not clearly indicate the exact location of the Shao clan. Even the locations of the other superfactions were not clearly marked. As for Tianyang City, it was also impossible to determine the location of the Shao clan based on the few wide streets. Hence, Xiao Yan could only seek help from others. At this moment, when the old man heard Xiao Yan's words, his originally tightly shut eyes slowly opened. His eyes were a little strange as he sized up the 3 people in front of him. Immediately, a glint flashed across his eyes and a tinge of surprise flashed across them. After which, he withdrew his gaze and said indifferently, 3 little children, why are you here at the Shao clan? I have a friend who is a member of the Shao clan. I have come here to look for him. I hope that Elder can lead the way. Xiao Yan smiled sincerely and said respectfully, looking for a friend? What's his name? Maybe this old man can help you call him out. The old man looked at Xiao Yan with disdain and spoke in a casual tone. It's just a nameless junior. There's no need to trouble senior. I'll go find him myself. Hey, kid, do you really think that this old man is easy to fool? Your cultivation has already stepped into the origin ancestor realm. With such talent, even if that friend of yours is weak, how weak can he be? How could he be some nameless nobody? Upon hearing this, the old man softly chuckled. His eyebrows slightly lowered as a powerful invisible pressure immediately enveloped Xiao Yan and Bai Hua's heads. As for Lian, the old man did not seem to have any intention of pressuring her. Xiao Yan's expression instantly changed when the pressure descended. His body immediately sank and an exclamation was emitted from his heart at this moment. This is soul power. Xiao Yan's pupils abruptly shrank as he felt the pressure akin to a meteor falling from the sky on his shoulder. He could not help but feel a wave of horror in his heart. This was the first time he had encountered such a terrifying spirit pressure ever since he came to the Yuanwu continent. Tell me, what is your purpose in coming to the Shao clan? The old man calmly looked at the 2 individuals who were bent over as he spoke in an indifferent tone. At the same time, the spirit pressure exerted on the 2 grew even heavier. Elder, you misunderstand. The 3 of us are here to look for an old friend. Xiao Yan tightly clenched his teeth. Genesis Chi frantically circulated in his body as spirit power gushed out from between his brows like a tide. It shrouded the space above the 2 individuals in an attempt to block the old man's spirit pressure. The old man let out a surprised soft "huh" in his heart as he ignored the words that were spat out from Xiao Yan's mouth. At the same time, a smile flashed across the corner of his mouth without anyone noticing. Although Xiao Yan's method did not achieve any substantial effect, it was likely that only those few brats from the Pill Tower among the younger generation in the middle region possessed such a spiritual strength. However, in comparison, Xiao Yan in front of him lacked the support of an external force. Just this point alone was sufficient to cause the old man to raise his eyebrows. Secretly nodding his head, the old man slowly withdrew the soul pressure he released after a while. His face was still indifferent, and his tone was slightly contemptuous as he laughed. Then he said, "Fine, I'll let you in. This old man wants to see just how big of a storm 3 little kids can cause." After speaking, he flicked his finger. A stream of light shot out and pointed towards the northern horizon. That was the answer Xiao Yan's group needed. Xiao Yan hurriedly led the 2 people by his side to once again respectfully bow to the old man when he saw this scene. The old man was too lazy to bother with them. Instead, his eyes leaped and looked at the transportation formation on the stone platform. The group of people who had already become impatient from waiting. Without his control, the transportation formation no longer functioned. These people could only wait with anxious faces while their mouths occasionally cursed. The old man's face was filled with disdain. After Xiao Yan's group turned around and left, he suddenly waved his sleeves. A golden light immediately rose from the enormous transportation formation. The noise disappeared in the blink of an eye. Even the square had become much quieter. As he gazed in the direction that the Xiao Yan trio had left, a satisfied smile involuntarily appeared on the old man's face. Soon after, he muttered to himself, "Xiao Yan. Not bad, little fellow. The future of the Xiao clan will depend on you youngsters. I only hope that you won't repeat the mistakes of your ancestor." Towards the end, a regretful expression involuntarily appeared in the old man's eyes. On the other side, with the old man's guidance, Xiao Yan and the other 2 were slowly walking in the direction that the ray of light had shot towards. Although they knew the location of the Xiao clan, this was after all Tianyang City, a city that belonged to the Xiao clan. Naturally, there was still a distance from the Xiao clan's main sect. Rather than rushing over in a hurry, it was better to take a leisurely and carefree trip. The 2 big men naturally did not pay attention to Xiao Yan as the 3 of them walked along the road. However, Lian Er, who had a lovely figure and a sweet and cute appearance, naturally attracted quite a number of somewhat heated gazes. This was especially the case when they noticed the grievance and weakness that Lian Er's pretty eyes revealed. The heated glow in their eyes became even more intense. Xiao Yan knit his brows slightly in the face of this. His gaze swept over the passers-by who were repeatedly throwing their gazes over. A dense coldness suddenly flashed across his eyes. Immediately, it caused a dangerous chill to suddenly rise in the hearts of those people. They hurriedly withdrew their presumptuous gazes. However, just as Xiao Yan was about to withdraw his gaze, an obscene gaze shot towards him. This caused him to instantly frown, and his icy cold gaze was thrown over. Chapter 1372. Hee, this little girl is really pretty. It's been a long time since I've seen such a fine product. Hee, Boss Xiao, isn't that young master's type the best? If we bring her back, wouldn't it be? Hee. On the street in front of Xiao Yan's group, a group of white-clothed figures directly blocked their path as the crowd dispersed. Beside the young man at the head of the group, a short and skinny wretched-looking man was whispering into the young man's ear. Soon after, the young man's strange laughter could be heard. At the same time, a pair of sunken eyes were impudently sizing up Lian Er's body. His gaze was as though he was inspecting an object. That young man merely glanced indifferently at the icy cold gaze that Xiao Yan shot at him. Under the escort of the people around him, he finally turned his gaze of disdain toward Xiao Yan a moment later. He curled his mouth and smiled as he spoke with a face full of disdain. "Leave this girl here. You guys can scram after you collect your spirit stones." The young man's laughter faded as he strode towards Lian Er with a sinister smile. He completely ignored the gloomy expressions on Xiao Yan's and Zhao Yu's faces. The surrounding passers-by could only shake their heads inwardly when they saw this. They cast sympathetic gazes at Xiao Yan's group. Although this person rarely came to Tianyang City, meeting him could only be considered a misfortune among misfortunes. The 2 parties were only about 10 feet apart. The young man took a step forward and arrived in front of Lian Er in the blink of an eye. With a sinister smile on his face, he raised his hand and extended it towards Lian Er's smooth face. At the same time, the rest of the people behind him stepped forward and prepared to stop Xiao Yan and Zhao Yu. From the looks of it, they had done this kind of thing many times before. However, this time, just as this group of people arrived in front of Xiao Yan and Zhao Yu's group with cold smiles, Xiao Yan completely ignored these people in white. He turned around and stared at the young man who was about to attack Lian Er. As the crowd stepped forward, he took a step forward. Immediately, a powerful aura swept out from his body like a storm. The terrifying wind pressure instantly pushed back the crowd in front of the shocked gazes of the surrounding passers-by. Almost at the same time Xiao Yan's step landed, his figure had already appeared in front of the young man. He raised his hand and grabbed the young man's wrist. With a gentle twist of his wrist, the young man's entire body instantly bent over uncontrollably. Ah! Damn bastard! Do you know who this young master is? I'm Zhao Mingjie. A furious roar was emitted from the young man's mouth at the same time as a painful, miserable cry sounded. A thought passed through his mind and the Genesis Qi in his body was about to erupt. However, Xiao Yan quickly kicked Zhao Mingjie's lower abdomen. The powerful force scattered the Genesis Qi that had just gathered in Zhao Mingjie's body as it flew backwards and smashed heavily into the group of white-clothed people. Cough cough. Kid, you actually dare to attack. Scram! Zhao Mingjie's body once again stood up in everyone's embrace in a miserable manner. The furious curse in his mouth had yet to fall when his eardrums were shaken by Xiao Yan's words until he felt a throbbing pain. The expression on his face immediately turned green. His heart instantly became furious. Even his voice had become much more hoarse. All of you go. Kill this little bastard for me. However, the people around him looked at each other this time, and no one dared to recklessly attack. As for the vulgar man from before, no one knew where he had hidden himself, and not even a trace of him could be seen. The aura and pressure that had surged out of Xiao Yan's body earlier clearly indicated the strength of the person in front of them. He was an expert at the Source Zone class. The strongest among them was merely an Origin Emperor. Most of them were merely at the initial stage of the Origin King class. Although such a lineup pressured an ordinary person, it did not pose any threat in front of an expert from the Source Zone class. Asking them to attack and kill the former was no different from sending themselves to their deaths. A bunch of trash. What did I raise you guys for? Seeing that none of the people beside him dared to make a move, the expression on Zhao Mingjie's face became even uglier. On the other hand, the few white-clothed people beside him could not help but curse in their hearts. Although Zhao Mingjie was the young master of the Zhao clan, the one who really raised them was also the head of the Zhao clan. To be honest, this person did not give them any benefits at all. If it were not for the orders of the head of the Zhao clan, they would not have allowed this fellow to order them around. At this moment, Xiao Yan led the two people behind him as he slowly stepped forward with a cold and indifferent expression. Each time he took a step forward, the powerful pressure that spread from his body would spread out a little. At the same time, a sharp killing intent also spread out. They did not doubt that once this pressure descended on their heads, it was likely that this black-robed young man in front of them would attack. The surrounding people immediately withdrew. Even some of the white-clothed people around Zhao Mingjie revealed expressions of fear as they withdrew. On the other hand, Zhao Mingjie's face was filled with fury as he stared at Xiao Yan in front of him. The Genesis Qi in his body once again gathered as killing intent surged in his eyes. Die! An explosive cry was suddenly emitted from Zhao Mingjie's mouth. The expression on his face instantly became ferocious. At the same time that his body charged forward, he rotated his hand. Genesis Qi swiftly gathered in his palm, transforming into a sharp long sword in the blink of an eye. His body moved, and he directly rushed towards Xiao Yan's group. The dense killing intent caused the expressions of the few passers-by to change. However, Xiao Yan's expression was ice-cold as he watched Zhao Mingjie charge towards him. He continued to step forward as he unhurriedly lifted his hand and gently clenched it in the air. Zhao Mingjie's charging figure abruptly froze in the air as tiny black threads appeared in the surrounding space. With a thought from Xiao Yan, they would instantly cut Zhao Mingjie into countless pieces. However, just as Xiao Yan was about to attack, the crowd by the side of the road in front hurriedly opened up a path. A green-clothed middle-aged man with a somewhat hurried expression walked out of the crowd. Behind him, the wretched-looking man who had disappeared earlier was following closely. "Sir, could you please show some mercy?" The middle-aged man had sensed the danger of the situation the moment he appeared. He did not dare to hesitate as he hurriedly cupped his hands together toward Xiao Yan and the rest and spoke with a solemn expression. Xiao Yan's hand paused slightly when he saw the middle-aged man. His gaze swept across the person before him as he frowned slightly and asked in a deep voice, "You want to stand up for him?" With Xiao Yan's eyesight, he was naturally able to tell that this middle-aged man in front of him was a 9-star Origin Zone. This kind of cultivation was much stronger than the two elders from the Bai clan whom he had met in Golden Saint City. Otherwise, it was likely that he would not have stopped. After all, The middle-aged man was a 9-star origin sect master and was quite powerful. If this continued, Xiao Yan would not be able to gain an advantage in Heavenly Sun City. Sir, you've misunderstood. I am Anan, the head of the Yin clan in Heavenly Sun City. I have no relationship with him. However, if you want to kill him, you should first consider the people behind him. The middle-aged man cupped his hands together again and hurriedly reported his identity. Are you talking about the Xiao clan? Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows. If that was the case, there was no need for him to worry. If the members of the Xiao clan were to find trouble with him because of such a mischievous person, then there was no point in going to the Xiao clan. However, Anan shook his head and slowly said, "It's his father. He is the head of the Xiao clan in Heavenly Sun City. That fellow's cultivation has already reached the Origin Venerate level. I hope that Sir can prioritize him." Xiao Yan's expression could not help but change slightly when he heard this. After some hesitation, he nodded and smiled at Anan, withdrew his hand and cupped his hands together. Anan smiled and nodded when he saw this. He finally breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. "Brat, just you wait. Today's debt, this young master will definitely make you pay back double." Without Xiao Yan's control, Zhao Mingjie's body abruptly smashed onto the ground. At the same time as he stood up in a miserable manner, dark and vicious words that carried a vicious intent were spat out from his mouth. Bang! Xiao Yan's body suddenly flashed the moment Zhao Mingjie's words sounded. He appeared in front of the former in the blink of an eye. He extended his hand and waved it, violently sending Zhao Mingjie flying with a slap. At the same time that fresh blood shot out, Zhao Mingjie's entire body was once again smashed into the crowd behind him. By the time everyone looked over, Zhao Mingjie's expression was already pale. Half of his face swiftly swelled and he had also descended into a coma. Seeing this, Anan could only helplessly shake his head. Zhao Mingjie's fate could only be said to be his own doing. He had clearly just been forcefully pulled back from the brink of death. In the blink of an eye, he dared to utter such provocative words. It was likely that he was extremely lucky that Xiao Yan did not kill him. "You don't know what's good for you," Anan muttered under his breath. Anan muttered in a low voice. To be honest, if this matter had not happened in the Yin family's territory, he would not have bothered to step in. Everyone was tired of Zhao Mingjie's notoriety. He only relied on his father, who was a source venerate. Otherwise, he would not have been allowed to live until now. After dealing with Zhao Mingjie, Xiao Yan did not stay any longer. He nodded gently to the two people behind him and continued walking forward. When the surrounding passers-by saw this, they immediately opened up a path for him. Behind him, Bai Hua and Lian Er followed closely. Just as they were about to pass by Anan, the latter once again opened her mouth and said with a smile, "Looking at the direction you are heading, could it be that you are heading to Xiao City?" Xiao City was where the Xiao clan's main sect was located. Xiao Yan's footsteps paused. He hesitated for a moment before nodding. Since you are heading to Xiao City, you should be careful. Although Zhao Mingjie's reputation is not good, he has some connections in the Xiao clan. You should be careful. Thank you for the reminder." Xiao Yan cupped his fists together and smiled. Soon after, he lifted his feet and continued to walk slowly towards the end of the street. In the blink of an eye, the group of three had completely disappeared at the end of the street. Anan narrowed his eyes as he watched Xiao Yan's group disappear. Soon after, he glanced at Zhao Mingjie, who was surrounded by a group of people, and coldly snorted. With a wave of his sleeve, he walked in the direction he had come from. Chapter 1373. By the time Xiao Yan's group arrived at Xiao City, it was already evening. What had happened during the day was still floating in front of Xiao Yan's eyes. With regards to this, Xiao Yan could only shake his head helplessly and toss those distracting thoughts to the back of his mind. Soon after, he led the two of them and randomly found a place to stay in the city. They planned to enter the Xiao clan tomorrow. The three of them were not in a good mood after encountering so many troubles in one day. In addition, they were also worried about the Xiao clan. Instead of rushing into the clan in a hurry, it was better for them to rest for a while. At the same time, they could also use this short period of time to inquire about the Xiao clan. Xiao Yan was still quite concerned about Zhao Mingjie, whom he had met earlier. While Xiao Yan's group arrived at Xiao City, two figures were seated opposite each other in a pavilion in the Ouyang clan. A tea set was neatly placed on the tea table in front of them. There was a cup in front of each of them. Tea was flowing and the fragrance of tea permeated the air. These two people were Ouyang Miao and Ouyang Yu. Little fellow, are you saying that this Xiao Yan is the person who defeated you in Beihai College back then? After hearing Ouyang Miao's explanation, Ouyang Yu involuntarily cast a sideways glance. He recalled the figure he had seen during the day and the shock in his heart became even more intense. Upon hearing this, Ouyang Miao nodded his head in a rather magnanimous manner. Soon after, he recounted the entire process of his encounter with Xiao Yan to the person in front of him in detail. After today's matter, his usually calm second uncle, the pillar of the Ouyang clan, had suddenly become interested in Xiao Yan, whom he had only met once. Not only did he help Xiao Yan obtain the Xian Jade ruler, but he had also called him over in the middle of the night to drink tea. Although he said that he was going to drink tea, the topic of conversation ultimately revolved around Xiao Yan. This caused Ouyang Miao's heart to be filled with doubt. Just what was so special about Xiao Yan that even Ouyang Yu would favor him this much? Wait, are you saying that Xiao Yan intervened because he saw the Emperor's seal art? Ouyang Yu raised his eyebrows. He looked at Ouyang Miao in front of him and asked with some surprise. The latter hesitated for a moment. After a brief moment of thought, he nodded and said, I don't know if that's the real reason, but Xiao Yan did indeed say that. Furthermore, he seemed to have cultivated the Emperor's seal technique before. However, he only knows the first 5 seals, right? This time, before Ouyang Miao could finish his sentence, Ouyang Yu interrupted him with a smile. At the same time, a bright light flashed in his eyes. Hearing this, Ouyang Miao felt a wave of astonishment in his heart. It was hard to imagine how Ouyang Yu would know all this. Not bad indeed. Imperial Seal Formula, Dark Heavy Buster Sword. No wonder he could reach this stage today. Ouyang Yu's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed. This caused Ouyang Miao to be even more flabbergasted. Just what could the Emperor's seal art and the Dark Heavy Buster Sword determine? Second uncle, I don't understand what you're saying. Ouyang Miao's brows were tightly knitted together. The more he did not understand, the more curious he became. At certain times, a person's nature was even more terrifying than some methods. Losing to Xiao Yan is not a loss for you. To be able to stand out among the countless experts of a continent, how could he be an ordinary person? Ouyang Yu took a sip of the fragrant tea and smiled. Hearing this, Ouyang Miao's expression was first startled. His mind rapidly spun. At a certain moment, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Ouyang Yu with his eyes wide open. Second uncle, you're saying that Xiao Yan is... He comes from another continent. Ouyang Yu smiled indifferently. He placed the teacup in his hand on the table, producing a clear sound. It was as if a piece of wood had struck the hole, but also as if it was the final word. In the pavilion, the atmosphere was silent for a moment. Ouyang Yu's expression returned to its usual calmness, while Ouyang Miao stared at the tea in front of him for a long time, as if he was secretly digesting this shocking news. After a long while, Ouyang Miao once again raised his head to look at the person in front of him. He frowned and asked, But second uncle, how can you be sure that Xiao Yan is from another continent with just these 2 things? Ouyang Miao was not unfamiliar with the Dark Heavy Buster Sword. After all, there were many rumors about the Dark Heavy Buster Sword and the Dark Jade Buster Sword on the continent. As for the Emperor's seal art, it was even more incomprehensible. Although the Emperor's seal art was a secret technique of the ancient clan, it was not something special. Xiao Yan had even said that he obtained the Emperor's seal art from an old friend. This did not mean anything. It's not a big deal that we know about the Dark Heavy Buster Sword. It's also not a big deal that we know about the Emperor's seal art. But there's one thing you need to be clear about. Before this, where did the Dark Heavy Buster Sword go, and where did the ancient clan's Emperor's seal art come from? Ouyang Yu laughed softly and immediately continued speaking. When I went to the Heavenly Cloud Villa, I heard from their first elder that the Dark Heavy Buster Sword had long been lost to another continent. This is also the reason why Bai Ruoxuan has been searching for the Dark Heavy Buster Sword for so many years without success. As for the Emperor's seal art, it was brought to him by an expert from the ancient clan. You and I clearly know that the expert from the ancient clan came from outside the Yuanwu continent. These 2 things that are impossible to obtain in the Yuanwu continent were given to Xiao Yan at the same time. Do you think that this is a coincidence? Ouyang Miao came to a sudden understanding the moment Xiao Yan's words sounded. The remaining trace of doubt in his heart was completely cut off. His heart carefully recalled the rough process of Xiao Yan's arrival in the middle region and felt extremely shocked. From a Dou back then, Xiao Yan had transformed into a Yuan Zong that even he had difficulty defeating. Just how many people in the entire continent could compare with Xiao Yan's growth rate? How about this? Make a trip to the ancient clan in a few days and borrow the last 3 seals of the Emperor seal art from their clan leader. If you meet Xiao Yan the next time, give this to him as a gift. Ouyang Yu mused for a moment before suddenly speaking again. However, if I were to give it to Xiao Yan, the ancient clan, just do what you need to do. I will speak to the ancient clan. Before Ouyang Miao could finish speaking, Ouyang Yu interrupted him. The latter could only nod his head when he heard this. Immediately, he seemed to have thought of something and frowned. That's right, the direction Xiao Yan is heading to seems to be the Xiao clan. Xiao clan? This time around, the person in front of Ouyang Miao suddenly raised his head when the last word was spat out from his mouth. His face was filled with surprise as he stared at Ouyang Miao. His eyes were filled with disbelief. It was a long while later before he exhaled a long breath. He nodded somewhat helplessly and slowly said, "Let's find another opportunity to go. I'm afraid that it is inappropriate to go now." The former nodded slightly when he heard this. He seemed to have understood Ouyang Yu's intention. The atmosphere in the square once again became quiet. Chapter 1374. The next day, when the first ray of sunlight shone through the window and turned into specks of light that shone on the ground, Xiao Yan, who had his eyes tightly shut, slowly opened them and softly muttered, "Today, I need to check out the city first. Looks like I have to make some inquiries in the city today. I'm afraid the Xiao clan isn't a good clan to allow the Zhao clan to behave so arrogantly." With a soft sigh, Xiao Yan turned over and got off the bed. After washing up, he led Bai Hua and Xiao Yan out of the house and onto the streets. They headed towards the center of the city where there were more people. Only there would they be able to hear more about the Xiao clan. Xiao Yan and the other two slowly walked on the street where there was an endless flow of people. The cool morning air was carried by a gentle breeze as it pounced on their faces. It was cool and refreshing, immediately causing one to feel refreshed. From time to time, various shouts could be heard from the 2 sides of the street that was paved with thick and heavy green stones. A dazzling array of goods were placed in the shops on both sides of the street. Many people shuttled back and forth like ants. Although it was early in the morning, Xiao City was already incomparably lively. In front of Xiao Yan and the rest, the streets that were formed by intermittent stone steps became increasingly higher. Looking from afar, there was an extremely high and steep slope in the north. It was like a mountain peak that had been cut off at a slanted angle. Buildings that filled their vision rose and fell one after another like a towering mountain forest. From time to time, there would be figures flashing across the sky. This caused Xiao Yan and the rest to raise their eyebrows. Xiao City was the main city of the Xiao clan, and no one was allowed to walk in the air without permission. Most of the people who walked in the air were either the guards of the Xiao clan in the city or some powerhouses whose cultivation had reached the level of a source venerate. Regardless of which one they were existences that the rest of the people in the city did not dare to offend. I heard that the insufferably arrogant young master of the Zhao clan was taught a lesson in Tianyang City yesterday. Today, he ran to Xiao City with an aggrieved expression. "Oh, this is really karma. This guy has done a lot of things that are out of line. For this to happen, he only has himself to blame." After being taught a lesson, why did he come to Xiao City instead of looking for his father, Zhao Jin? He naturally came to find his true backer. With that person from the Xiao clan around, how can he not stand up for him? Haha, that's true. One has to look at the owner before beating a dog. If news of the dog's leg being beaten were to spread, the owner's face would be lost. Xiao Yan's footsteps followed a unique rhythm as he slowly walked forward. His gaze swept over the shops on both sides of the road. Waves of discussions were occasionally transmitted to his ears. Soon after, it stirred a wave of laughter. Behind him, Bai Hua and Lian Er involuntarily exchanged glances with each other when they heard this. They could not resist lowering their heads and emitting a mocking laugh. They wondered just what kind of reaction Zhao Mingjie would have if these words were to be transmitted to his ears. Xiao Yan gently shook his head. He knit his brows slightly. From the meaning behind the words of these people, it seemed that there were indeed some shameless people within the Xiao clan. His originally low opinion of the Xiao clan had become even lower. Of course, Xiao Yan was also aware that the discussions of outsiders were merely discussions. This was merely what he had seen with his own eyes. He would only be able to find out just how the Xiao clan was like after experiencing it. Just as Xiao Yan's three-man group was slowly walking forward, a somewhat familiar voice was suddenly transmitted from the human flow not far in front of them. In comparison, however, the tone of the owner of this voice appeared to be much more aggrieved. "Young Master Chu, you have to seek justice for me. That brat beat up my men on the street and even broke a few of my ribs. How dare he commit such a violent act in Tianyang City? It's one thing to injure me, but this is a slap to your face." Xiao Yan involuntarily stopped walking with a frown as the voice approached. He turned his head to look at Bai Hua and Lianer and involuntarily sighed. Enemies are really bound to meet on a narrow road. His voice had just sounded when the crowd in front of him began to scatter in all directions. Soon after, Xiao Yan saw Zhao Mingjie, who had changed into a set of white clothes. At this moment, he was surrounding a young man. His face was filled with grievances as he repeatedly complained. When that young man heard this fellow's exaggerated words, a dense expression was revealed on his handsome face. "What does that brat look like? Where is he now?" The young man's gaze suddenly fell on Lian who was behind Xiao Yan. His gaze involuntarily moved, but his tone was icy cold. "This." Zhao Mingjie was speechless. Hearing this, Zhao Mingjie was momentarily at a loss for words. Yesterday, Xiao Yan's attack was so sharp that they did not even have the chance to retaliate. In the end, all of them were suppressed by Xiao Yan's aura alone. How would they have the time to pay attention to where he had gone? "Haha, young Master Zhao, I haven't seen you for a day, but you're still alive and kicking. Looks like I was too lenient yesterday." At this moment, a clear laughter that contained some ridicule was suddenly transmitted into Zhao Mingjie's ears. Immediately, this voice exploded in Zhao Mingjie's ears like thunder. At the same time that his expression changed drastically, his gaze also abruptly landed on Xiao Yan's body. At this moment, the latter was looking at him with a smile. He completely ignored the young man beside him at this moment. You actually dare to appear in Xiao City?" When Zhao Mingjie recovered, the fear on his face instantly disappeared when he thought of the young man beside him. His face was filled with resentment as he stared at the black-robed young man, who was standing in front of him, and shouted with all his might. Zhao Mingjie's furious roar instantly attracted the gazes of the passers-by on the street. Their gazes first gathered on Zhao Mingjie and the young man beside him. Soon after, they suddenly turned and looked at Xiao Yan and the others, who were standing opposite them. Immediately, they couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. Many people were curious in their hearts. Who exactly was this person that could make Zhao Mingjie so furious? Soon after, however, a small portion of people who had some understanding of what had happened yesterday immediately recognized the identity of Xiao Yan's three-man group. As a soft murmur sounded, the expressions of the surrounding passers-by changed once again. Numerous gazes that contained surprise also landed on Xiao Yan's body. "Since even you, young Master Zhao, can come to Xiao City, why can't I?" Hearing this, Xiao Yan coldly smiled. His gaze slowly moved up and landed on the young man, his eyes calm. "You?" Zhao Mingjie was just about to open his mouth when he was stopped by a young man by the side. After which, he bitterly withdrew. That young man's gaze also turned to Xiao Yan at this moment. He slowly said with a smile, "Don't worry." What a glib tongue. Today, this young master wants to see just who gave you the courage to hit my, Xiao Chuhong's people. The young man smiled faintly as he gently lifted his foot. As he took a step forward, the aura of a source sect expert swept out from his body. Chapter 1375. Source Sect. The second young master of the Xiao clan has also broken through to the source sect. When the aura unfurled from Xiao Chuhong's body, the expressions of the passers-by on the street changed in an instant. Cries of surprise could not help but ring out one after another as countless astonished gazes turned towards the latter. "I've heard that you're also a source sect expert. It just so happens that this young master has just broken through, and has yet to find someone to spar with. Today, I'll start with you." Xiao Chuhang smiled faintly when he felt the astonished gazes from the surroundings. Soon after, his expression abruptly turned cold as he abruptly clenched his fist. A formidable force formed in his palm in the blink of an eye. His foot stomped on the ground as his body instantly appeared in front of Xiao Yan like a bolt of lightning. Formidable claw winds viciously swept toward Xiao Yan like an inescapable net, the formidable force tearing pitch-black scars in the invisible space around them. In the face of Xiao Chuhong's unhesitatingly ferocious attack, Xiao Yan took half a step back. The tip of his foot gently pushed off the ground as he began to perform a mysterious footwork in the short distance between the two of them. He had used an extremely bizarre movement technique to completely dodge Xiao Chuhong's countless claw winds. Not bad speed, but speed alone is useless in front of me. Xiao Chuhong's eyes involuntarily froze for a moment when he saw that Xiao Yan had managed to dodge his attack. Soon after, he let out an icy chuckle. As his foot stepped forward, an invisible stream of wind unfurled around his body. His figure was completely submerged in the invisible stream of wind as he pounced toward Xiao Yan like a phantom. Wind-ripping hand. As the wind swirled around him, Xiao Chuhong's speed undoubtedly increased significantly. His 10 fingers curled into claws, and as the wind wrapped around him, the wind around his claws abruptly changed. Genesis Chi rapidly gathered between his palms, and wherever his claws passed, the invisible space was torn apart as sharp sonic booms rang out. Xiao Chuhong's sudden increase in speed and attack caused the expressions of quite a number of people present to change. He was after all the second young master of the Xiao clan. This kind of technique was rarely seen in the outside world. Forget about this wind-ripping hand. Even the strange agility do technique that he had used earlier was something that was rarely seen in the outside world. However, it was something that he could easily use. Even so, all of this appeared much more ordinary in Xiao Yan's eyes. At the end of the day, Xiao Chuhang was merely a one-star origin zone. Without even mentioning the suppression in terms of cultivation, Xiao Yan believed that he would be able to easily defeat Xiao Chuhang with a single hand given his current battle power. This mysterious movement technique that would appear dazzling in the eyes of ordinary people was completely useless in the face of Xiao Yan's powerful spirit power. Xiao Yan's expression remained indifferent as he watched Xiao Chuhang draw closer and closer. With a wave of his sleeve, surging Genesis Chi wrapped around it. Like a metal plate, it landed on Xiao Chuhong's palm at an extremely tricky angle, instantly neutralizing the powerful wind from the claw. Such a precise and tricky attack would still be acceptable if it was only once. However, it was able to completely neutralize the force from the claw with the same strength and technique at the same position each time. It was likely that no one of the same generation as Xiao Chuhang would be able to accomplish such a feat. However, it was extremely easy for Xiao Yan, who possessed spirit power that far surpassed Xiao Chuhong's. Bang bang bang. Every time the two of them collided, Xiao Chuhong's expression would turn a little uglier. This was especially so when Xiao Chuhang retreated after dozens of exchanges. The expression on his face was completely replaced by a solemn one. On both of his palms, there were 2 identical bloodstains that pierced his heart and caused him to feel pain. The consecutive attacks had failed to cause even the slightest bit of damage to Xiao Yan, and had even been easily received by the latter in such a relaxed manner. Such a dramatic outcome involuntarily caused Xiao Chuhong's face to twitch. The gazes of the surrounding passers-by gradually turned strange, while their originally extremely ugly expressions grew even more ashen. You and I are both from the Origin sect. I don't believe that you can be any stronger. Xiao Chuhong's face gradually turned gloomy. As he uttered those words in a low voice, he suddenly took a step back. He quickly raised both of his hands to his chest and linked his fingers together. As his fingertips overlapped, a green curtain condensed in the void around him. Wind God's fury. With a low cry, the dozen green curtains around him swiftly formed. Waves of cool wind blew over for no apparent reason in the sky above his head. As it flowed, it actually faintly formed an enormous illusory figure. It was accompanied by a frightening aura as it stood behind Xiao Chuhang. The expressions of quite a number of people present instantly changed when this illusory figure was formed. Numerous shocked gazes watched the scene in front of them. Some of them had even retreated into the distance. Their eyes were filled with a grave expression. Wind God's fury. This fellow is crazy. Is he trying to destroy this street? Numerous exclamations sounded one after another. Some of the experts who had some understanding of the situation could no longer be bothered about anything else. Their bodies swiftly rushed towards the distant street. Once the might of the Wind God's fury erupted, it was likely that this street would be destroyed in an instant. Baz! Almost at the same time, the few guards of the Xiao clan who were patrolling in the sky above a building deep within Xiao City also discovered the great commotion. After discovering that someone was actually using the Wind God's fury, the expressions of many of them changed slightly. Immediately, they hurriedly moved their bodies, transforming into a couple of lightning bolts that swiftly flew towards Xiao Yan's group. At this moment, waves of frightening wind pressure spread out from within the illusory figure as the illusory figure behind Xiao Chuhang gradually solidified. The strength of the wind pressure actually caused the shops on both sides of the street to sway. Even the street where Xiao Yan's group was currently located trembled slightly. This is a Grand Dao skill? Sensing the powerful aura emitted from the illusory figure, Xiao Yan could not help but raise his eyebrows slightly. He was a little curious in his heart. From the way Xiao Chuhang had mobilized the Grand Dao of Wind, the formation of this illusory figure seemed to be a Grand Dao skill. However, there seemed to be a slight difference. Although this difference was extremely vague, Xiao Yan was still able to distinguish it with his sharp senses. It was also at this moment that numerous sonic booms swiftly rushed over from the sky above the distant building. In the blink of an eye, they appeared in the sky above the street where Xiao Yan's group was located. Seeing this, Xiao Yan curled his mouth and smiled. From the looks of it, there was no need for him to take action. Chapter 1376. Xiao Yan smiled and nodded his head as his gaze swept across the figures that were rapidly flying over from afar. Xiao Yan was indeed one of the three great clans. Their foundation was indeed not something that an ordinary faction could compare with. Just the strength of these people had already reached the Origin Emperor level. One of them had even stepped into the Origin Zone level, a level higher than Xiao Yan. Just the cultivation of the clan guards had already reached such a level. It was not difficult to imagine how strong the Xiao clan's foundation was. On the roofs on both sides of the street and in the sky, over a dozen Xiao clan guards wearing similar robes were solemnly looking at Xiao Chuhang, who was crazily condensing a huge illusory figure in front of them. Their brows were tightly knitted together, especially when they sensed the powerful energy aura that permeated from the illusory figure. Their expressions became even more solemn. Their gazes swept across Xiao Yan's group, who had a calm expression on their faces on the other side of the street. They could not help but feel a little surprised in their hearts. Who was this person that could actually make the second young master of the Xiao clan, who was used to being arrogant and domineering, so furious that he had even unleashed the fury of the wind god? However, based on the current situation, they did not have the time to bother about Xiao Yan's group. If they did not hurry up and stop Xiao Chuhang, it was likely that a disaster would occur in this place. Once the commotion was too great, it would not be a good thing for them or Xiao Chuhang. Young Master Chu, fighting is strictly prohibited in Xiao City. You have already violated the rules earlier. Please stop immediately. A middle-aged man slowly stepped out from the group. He frowned and cupped his hands together towards Xiao Chuhang as he spoke in a solemn tone. They had noticed the commotion that had occurred here since long ago. However, they had a rather good understanding of Xiao Chuhang's character. Coupled with the fact that both sides didn't attack too heavily, they didn't pay any attention to it. However, they never expected that the situation would develop to such an extent, and they had no choice but to pay attention to it. All battles were strictly prohibited in Xiao City. This was a rule set by the Xiao clan. Previously, Xiao Chuhang had attacked Xiao Yan first, which was already considered a violation of the rules. Now that he had unleashed the wrath of the wind god, once it was fully condensed, the energy contained within it would erupt, and it was likely that the surrounding area would be affected. At that time, not to mention the guards present here would be punished by the higher-ups. Even Xiao Chuhang would not be able to avoid being reprimanded by the clan. Humph, since when is it your turn to care about how I do things? Xiao Chuhang did not seem to care in the slightest when he heard this. An icy snort was emitted from his nose as the rage in his heart surpassed his rationality. He continued to gather the Genesis Chi in his body with all his might, causing the giant illusory figure behind him to grow increasingly corporeal under the frantic infusion of Genesis Chi. Its powerful aura caused the expressions of the guards present to turn grave. Amongst them, with the exception of the middle-aged man who was a Genesis ancestor, the others were all Genesis emperors. They were naturally no match for Xiao Chuhang's wrath of the wind god. In fact, even the middle-aged man did not have the confidence to completely receive Xiao Chuhang's attack. As members of the Xiao clan, they naturally had a good understanding of wind god's wrath's power. Although Xiao Chuhang had just broken through to the Genesis ancestor stage, with the support of wind god's wrath and his great Tao of wind, even a 2-star Genesis ancestor might not be able to receive his full power. These are the clan rules. I hope that young Master Chu will abide by them. Otherwise, I'm afraid that you won't be able to bear the consequences if the elders blame you. The middle-aged man's tone was a little solemn. Humph. Can't bear the consequences? Then let them talk to my big brother. I'm interested to see who exactly is the one who can't bear the consequences. As for now, all of you scram. Xiao Chuhang angrily snorted. As his words rang out, his body abruptly jerked as the giant illusory figure behind him completely condensed. Bzz. At this moment, a powerful wind pressure once again gushed out from the virtual image, forming a hurricane that swept out in all directions with Xiao Chuhang as the center. Seal the battlefield. We must minimize our losses. The expressions of the dozen or so guards around them immediately changed upon seeing this. The middle-aged man hurriedly cried out an order, and immediately waved his hand. The remaining people around him swiftly nodded in response. Their figures swiftly withdrew, spreading out to a certain distance. Vast Genesis Chi frantically surged out, agglomerating together to form a huge light barrier that sealed Xiao Yan's group and Xiao Chuhang within. Kid, it's your honor to die under Wind God's wrath. After Wind God's wrath was completed, a sinister smile involuntarily appeared on Xiao Chuhang's face when he saw that the Xiao Yan trio was completely still. Soon after, he flipped his right hand and lifted it upwards. The illusory figure behind him also lifted its giant hand into the air as boundless energy gathered in its palm. Soon after, it slammed down on the Xiao Yan trio. Bzz. An extremely terrifying aura of destruction spread under the giant hand. The frightening wind pressure made it difficult for one to move. Just a glance at the giant hand was enough to make one feel fear in one's heart. An ordinary person would likely not even have the courage to fight against it. The hand fell from the sky, causing space to crumble along the way. Countless giant spatial cracks were torn open, as if even the world was about to be shattered by this palm. The might of Wind God's wrath is indeed well deserved. Outside of the battleground, some of the stronger practitioners had pale faces as they watched this scene in the battleground. Just the aura that leaked out was already so terrifying. It was difficult to imagine just how terrifying it would be if this palm were to land. Moreover, this palm alone was not the entirety of Wind God's fury's strength. Wind God's wrath shocks the world. Kid, go and die. At this moment, Xiao Chuhang involuntarily let out a cold laugh. The ferocious expression on his face became even more pronounced. The fact that Xiao Yan was able to force him to such an extent was undoubtedly akin to giving the prideful Xiao Chuhang a cold slap. However, as long as this palm landed, all the grievances that he had suffered today would disappear without a trace. At this moment, the dozen over Xiao clan guards were looking at Xiao Yan's group with pity in their eyes. At this moment, they no longer had the chance to resist. Among the three of them, it was likely that only the leader, the black-robed young man, had the slightest chance of survival. Even so, it was likely that the outcome would not be good. On the battlefield, Xiao Yan finally shook his head slowly as countless gazes gathered on him. He sighed softly. Originally, he had hoped that these guards would be able to get rid of the trouble in front of him. However, looking at the current situation, he had no choice but to personally deal with it. Xiao Yan's footsteps gently stepped forward. He raised his head and looked at the enormous palm that was falling toward him. His eyes were indifferent. A thought passed through his heart and a dazzling golden glow suddenly surged out from within his body. In an instant, it transformed into a giant with a golden glow flowing over its body. A bright red flame shrouded it as it suddenly threw a punch forward, violently smashing into the enormous palm. Chapter 1377. Die! With a sinister laugh, Xiao Chuhang stared at the body that was like an ant under the huge palm as killing intent surged in his heart. Noisy! Xiao Yan merely let out an indifferent sound in the face of this. His expression was indifferent. A thought passed through his mind and the King Kong body was agglomerated in the blink of an eye. With Xiao Yan's familiarity with the giant elephant skill, he only needed a thought to use it now. The bright red lotus karmic flame surged up at the same time all the strength in his body gathered at this moment. It covered his golden body, causing it to appear just like a fiery red sun. The heat contained an explosive strength. Immediately after, he fiercely punched forward. The gigantic crimson fist shadow brought about a terrifying scorching strength chi as it forcefully broke through the invisible space. Wherever the fist passed, it would explode like never before. In addition to the burning of the heavenly fire, the pitch-black space was constantly distorting, and waves of sharp and ear-piercing sonic booms also spread out like thunder. In the face of Xiao Yan's volcanic eruption-like ferocious attack, The empty space in front of him had completely collapsed in an instant. Compared to the frightening wind pressure that was brought about by the enormous hand, the might of this punch could be said to be even greater than the latter. Almost at the same time, a hint of seriousness involuntarily surfaced on Xiao Chuhong's originally ferocious face. Immediately, he hardened his heart, and while his face was filled with ferocity, the power of the palm that landed also became more and more tyrannical. Wind God's fury, break for me! Soon after, under the countless number of gazes outside of the arena, the huge palm that was like a meteorite that had descended from the heavens finally arrived. After which, it heavily collided with the huge fist that seemed to burn the heavens. Rumble! The terrifying collision was like a volcanic eruption. In an instant, an earth-shattering sound erupted. Even the entire street that was sealed off began to tremble violently. However, soon after, the terrifying energy that he had imagined did not sweep out. Instead, it rapidly compressed at the point where the two energies collided. The space caved in and actually formed a strange vortex that sucked in all the energy in the surrounding space and condensed it into a ball. Once one of the two was unable to endure, this energy would be instantly broken through by the other party and unleash an even more ferocious attack. At this moment, whoever was the first to give up would have to bear the impact of this energy. To think that they have actually fought to such an extent. The expressions of the Shao clan guards outside the arena were ugly when they saw this grim situation. Putting aside the fact that a battle had occurred in Shao City, Xiao Chuhang had actually fallen into such a dangerous situation. Regardless of the outcome of today's matter, it was likely that this group of people would receive quite a great reprimand. At this moment, Xiao Chuhang's expression had also rapidly turned grave. He did not expect that even with the might of the wind god's fury, he was actually unable to break Xiao Yan's attack in an instant. At this moment, if both parties continued to drag this out, it was likely that it would be extremely difficult to determine the outcome. The fastest method now was likely to be to go all out and fight. While this thought flashed across his mind, Xiao Chuheng took advantage of the fact that Xiao Yan had yet to make a move to narrow his eyes. A ruthless glint flickered within his eyes. Immediately, the expression on his face suddenly turned dark. He suddenly flipped his left hand and the illusory image behind him once again threw a palm forward. It was accompanied by a ferocious wind that ruthlessly smashed towards the spot where the two collided. Is it going to end? The crowd outside the arena looked at the situation within the battle circle. While they were feeling anxious, they also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. This battle had finally ended. If this continued, they were really worried that the energy barrier set up by the Shao clan guards would not be able to withstand it. Under countless gazes, the huge palm once again descended. Immediately, it carried an overwhelming wind pressure as it ruthlessly imprinted itself on the spot where the two collided. Buzz! In an instant, a buzzing trembling sound was suddenly emitted. A frightening wind pressure carried an incomparably oppressive aura as it heavily pressed down. The street below also had an enormous crack line formed from the pressure. It spread all the way to Xiao Yan's feet before coming to a stop. At the same time, the enormous energy that was gathered within the swirl also began to tremble violently at this moment. From the looks of it, the ending appeared to have already appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Is this brat unable to hold on any longer? After all, his opponent is the second young master of the Shao clan. Moreover, he has even used the wind god's fury. Even though he has lost this battle, it is still an honorable defeat. At this moment, the scene that appeared on the battlefield caused quite a number of people to cry out in surprise. Everyone clearly understood that the collision before them was already the final fight between them. Whoever was the first to give in would likely be the first to be defeated here. Dang! Xiao Chuhang roared. The powerful energy contained in his two palms completely erupted at this moment. It suddenly charged forward. At the same time, the surging energy gathered in the whirlpool was about to explode at this moment. However, it was under this kind of situation and under the focus of a countless number of gazes that Xiao Yan suddenly withdrew his fist and removed his only defense. Is this fellow courting death? Outside the arena, exclamations sounded once again. Wasn't such an action no different from courting death? Without any resistance, Xiao Chuhong's attack would completely land on his body. In addition to the energy of heaven and earth that was attracted over, once it exploded, there was no chance for him to survive. As expected, the moment Xiao Yan withdrew his fist, Xiao Chuhong's two palms suddenly fell. At the same time, the terrifying energy gathered in between his palms also erupted at this moment. Ha! However, it was also at this moment that Xiao Yan's fist, which he had just pulled back an instant ago, suddenly shot forward in a lightning-like manner with a kind of swift and fierce speed that was difficult to imagine. At the same time that a low cry erupted from Xiao Yan's mouth, one could only hear a muffled bang sound. The huge fist, which was covered by a flame, actually violently penetrated the energy that was about to explode under everyone's shocked gazes. At the same time, it heavily smashed into the space between Xiao Chuhong's two palms. The wild and violent energy also turned into a bright red flame pillar at this moment and suddenly erupted. In merely an instant, it penetrated the enormous illusionary image behind Xiao Chuhang. Immediately, it collided with the enormous energy barrier that covered this entire area, emitting a wave of heavy bell-like sound. This punch, Xiao Chuhong's full-force attack, was forcefully blasted apart by the latter in an unbelievable manner. From the beginning until the end, Xiao Chuhang was not even able to display the slightest bit of strength that he should have. This battle could be said to be absurd. The Do technique is not bad. Unfortunately, it is not mature enough. The golden light scattered, revealing the black-robed Xiao Yan under it. His posture was the same as before, and his face was the same as before. It was as though what had happened a moment ago had nothing to do with him as he softly spat out this comment. Immediately, he smiled at the two people behind him, lifted his leg, and walked to the end of the street. It was also at this moment that... Sir, please wait a moment. Chapter 1378. In the arena, the middle-aged man's body suddenly flashed. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Xiao Yan and the other two and said with a smile, "You want to capture me?" Xiao Yan's footsteps paused. His tone seemed to be casual as he spoke. However, the middle-aged man could clearly sense the slight change in the aura on Xiao Yan's body. He hurriedly cupped his hands together and said, "Mister, you have misunderstood. Mister, you have misunderstood. It is normal for two people to win or lose in a spar. I have no reason to take action because of this. However, the battle between the two of you today has taken place in Xiao City. This is against the rules of Xiao City. Therefore, I would like to ask Mister to follow me and explain this matter to the elder before leaving." Xiao Yan lowered his eyelids when he heard this. His eyes flickered. In other words, this fellow wanted to bring him to the Xiao clan. This way, he might be able to avoid some trouble. As this thought flashed across Xiao Yan's mind, the middle-aged man suddenly opened his mouth and spoke again just as Xiao Yan was about to reply. "Mister, you don't have to worry about this trip. After all, my Xiao clan is a reputable force on the continent. We definitely won't do something like threatening revenge. I guarantee that as long as you explain the cause and effect of this matter, I will personally accompany you and send you out safely. There is no need to escort me. Let's go." After making up his mind, Xiao Yan smiled and spoke to the middle-aged man indifferently. The middle-aged man immediately heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. A smile surfaced on his face. Regardless of the outcome of this matter, with Xiao Yan around, the pressure on him would be reduced. Moreover, this matter was mainly Xiao Chuhong's fault. It was likely that the elders would act according to their discretion. The middle-aged man once again cupped his hands together towards Xiao Yan. Soon after, he waved his hand towards the other guards. A few figures immediately flew towards the pale-faced Xiao Chuhang. Not only was the wind god's fury instantly destroyed after receiving Xiao Yan's all-powerful punch, but the current Xiao Chuhang was also seriously injured. If no one supported him, it was likely that he would not even have the strength to stand. On the other hand, Xiao Yan was led by the middle-aged man and headed to the Xiao clan with Bai Hua. The group of people flew above Xiao City and looked at the towering wall at the end of the street from afar. Xiao Yan's emotions couldn't help but heat up slightly at this moment. Although they had experienced many dangers along the way, in the end, they had still arrived here. After a while, Xiao Yan's group of four stood at the end of the street. This place was a small square. The broken stone steps came to an abrupt stop over 100 steps away. The ground was paved with green stones that were as smooth as a mirror. If one were to look down from here, one would be able to see the entire Xiao City. The continuous number of pavilions were just like a mountain range that extended outwards. The enormous city was just like a huge beast that sat here. At this moment, in front of Xiao Yan's group was a huge arched door. There weren't any walls on either side of the arched door, nor were there any alleys. At a glance, it looked very natural. However, in this seemingly empty space, Xiao Yan could clearly sense that there was an astonishing spatial fluctuation faintly emitting from the space. An invisible force was standing on both sides of the arched door, forming a spatial barrier that blocked everything in front of him. There was also a special pressure that seemed to be looking down on them. A thought passed through Xiao Yan's mind. An invisible spiritual strength spread out and pressed against the invisible wall. Immediately, a shocking rebounding force shot out. At the same time that Xiao Yan's spiritual strength was reflected, it also caused his spirit to be shaken until he felt a little giddy. What a sturdy spatial barrier! Surprise flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes as he steadied his mind. He could not help but feel a little apprehensive. Behind him, Bai Hua's expression also changed slightly. Evidently, she had sensed the extraordinariness of this spatial barrier. Only Lien looked at the huge arched door in front of her with a flawless expression. Her beautiful eyes revealed traces of curiosity. Haha, this spatial barrier was personally reinforced by the successive clan leaders of our Shao clan. It is enough to withstand the full force attack of an origin venerate. It is impossible for an ordinary origin zone to break it. The middle-aged man smiled faintly and said, "It can withstand the full force attack of an origin venerate?" Xiao Yan could not help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. He clicked his tongue in admiration. As expected of one of the three great clans of the Middle region, such a foundation was indeed far from what an ordinary faction could compare with. Xiao Yan and the rest slowly shifted their gazes away from the invisible barrier. Soon after, they looked towards the arched door in front of them. At the center of the arched door was a distorted space. Only by passing through this space would they be considered to have truly entered the Xiao clan. Two old men were currently seated on both sides of the arched door. One of them indifferently glanced at the few people in front of him. His gaze paused on Lianer and Bai Hua for a moment. Soon after, his gaze landed on Xiao Yan. He sized him up and a look of surprise flashed across the depths of his old eyes. An origin venerate expert. While the old man was sizing up Xiao Yan and the other two, Xiao Yan's gaze also swept back and forth between the two old men. Immediately, his eyes narrowed slightly. Although the two old men looked ordinary, the pressure that was faintly discernible from their bodies was not any weaker than Bai Rong's. They were clearly two experts who had stepped into the origin venerate stage. The group arrived in front of the two old men. The middle-aged man took a step forward and respectfully cupped his hands towards the two old men. After explaining the reason, the old man indifferently raised his hand. Immediately, the distorted space behind them immediately transformed into a path. The middle-aged man turned his head and nodded at Xiao Yan and the other two before taking the lead to enter. Behind him, Xiao Yan lifted his head and looked at the huge arched door in front of him with a slightly heated gaze. "Ancestor Xiao Xian, I am coming." The three of them quietly muttered in their hearts. Only then did they follow the middle-aged man's footsteps and disappear into the distorted space. After Xiao Yan and the rest entered the distorted space, the two old men outside the door involuntarily opened their deep eyes. They looked at each other and softly laughed. "Haha, not bad kid. It is said that this little fellow was only King Yuan back then. In a short few years, he has actually grown to such an extent. Even in the entire middle region, there are very few people who can match his growth speed. Heh, not bad indeed. However, he has after all injured Xiao Chuhang. That brat is no ordinary person. I'm afraid that he will have to suffer a little if he wants to enter the Xiao clan." At the same time, a white-clothed figure seated on a cliff within the Xiao clan suddenly opened his eyes the moment Xiao Yan and the rest stepped into the arched door. A relieved smile involuntarily appeared on his calm face. This person was Xiao Xian. "Little fellow, you are finally here." With a soft chuckle, Xiao Xian slowly stood up from the cliff. The tip of his foot gently pressed against the void. Wind swirled under his feet and condensed into an invisible blade. Soon after, his body immediately turned into a ray of light and swiftly flew down the mountain. Chapter 1379. After Xiao Yan's group entered the spatial tunnel, the light in front of them suddenly brightened. This caused them to shut their eyes out of habit. Soon after, they slowly opened them. The shock in their eyes immediately became denser. At this moment, an extremely long stone staircase appeared in front of Xiao Yan's group. There were no buildings on either side of the stone staircase. Instead, it was filled with lush greenery. When one looked into the distance, one could see that there were quite a number of buildings within the greenery. Faintly, One could hear some human voices being transmitted from afar. Finally, the voices gradually faded into the lush greenery. When one turned one's head around, everything behind them was no longer there. Other than the arched door, which was still standing, the original spatial barrier on both sides had already transformed into an extremely thick and heavy city wall. It stood majestically under the cover of green moss. There was an invisible ancient aura spreading from it. There is indeed a completely different world within this place. Lifting his head to look at the world in front of him, Xiao Yan's eyes swept across the sky above his head. His eyes narrowed. There was a faint distorted feeling at that spot. Clearly, the entire Xiao clan was enveloped within a layer of distorted space. Such a huge spatial boundary could be said to be a huge investment. It was no wonder that it looked so different from the marketplace that one could see in the outside world. One of the three great clans of the Middle Region did not have an undeserved reputation. The three of you, please follow me. The middle-aged man smiled at Xiao Yan, after which his body moved. His feet stepped on the empty space and rushed forward. Behind him, Xiao Yan and Bai Hua exchanged glances and nodded gently. Soon after, their bodies moved and followed closely behind. A moment later, the group of four stood on a cliff. In front of them was still a continuous stone staircase. However, at this moment, there were many buildings built against the mountain on both sides of the stone staircase. Stone staircases spiraled up the cliff on both sides. Above them were two small squares of similar size. Many members of the Xiao clan were shuttling back and forth. Occasionally, sparring sounds would be heard, causing some liveliness to appear in this place. In the middle of the two plazas, right above the stone stairs that extended upwards, there was a large hole in the air. At this moment, the four people were standing there. Along with a wave of steady footsteps, an old man in a purple robe walked out of the hall. His gaze swept past Xiao Yan and the other two, and then stopped on the middle-aged man. He glanced at the latter and said indifferently, "Xiao Huan, do you know your crime?" Hearing this, the middle-aged man hurriedly stepped forward, bowed respectfully, and cupped his fists. "Your subordinate has failed in his duty. Your subordinate is willing to accept the punishment. But elder, all of this is... That's enough. You don't have to say any more. By the time you come to report, the entire Xiao city will be in chaos. Go ahead. I won't say much about what to do." The old man spoke indifferently. Only then did Xiao Huan bow with a pale face. From the looks of it, it was likely that this elder was already aware of what had happened in Xiao City. His intention of bringing Xiao Yan and the other two here this time around was likely useless. However, just as Xiao Huan was about to bring Xiao Yan and the other two away from this place, the purple-robed old man once again opened his mouth and said, "You can leave. They can stay." Hearing this, Xiao Huan was immediately startled. Even Xiao Yan and the other two at the side were slightly stunned. The former wanted to open his mouth to argue, but the purple-robed old man's cold gaze suddenly shot over, causing his heart to buzz and tremble. He could not help but look at Xiao Yan and the other two with an apologetic face. Soon after, he clenched his teeth and quickly retreated. After Xiao Huan left, the old man's gaze finally began to slowly size up the three people in front of him. When he sensed the difference between Bai Hua and Lian Er, a surprised glint involuntarily flashed across the old man's indifferent eyes. He involuntarily nodded his head gently. Only then did his gaze stop on Xiao Yan's body as he said faintly, "You are Xiao Yan?" When the old man's words came out, the expression on Xiao Yan's face instantly changed. He immediately raised his gaze and looked at the old man in front of him with a face full of surprise. After hesitating for a while, he frowned and said seriously, "Elder, how do you recognize me?" "Humph, in the current Xiao clan, as long as one is an elder, who does not recognize you? Ever since you entered Xiao City, your identity is no longer a secret." The old man sneered, as if he found Xiao Yan's words somewhat laughable. In response, Xiao Yan could not help but be speechless. He originally thought that he was already quite cautious along the way. Even when he entered the territory of Xiao clan, he did not easily reveal his identity. However, he did not expect that he had already been discovered by the old man in front of him. "If you want to test the style of my Xiao clan, you should not use an outsider to do so. Once you enter the clan, you will naturally experience it for yourself. However, I advise you not to use this method elsewhere in the future. Otherwise, I am afraid that you will fall into a trap." After softly reminding, Xiao Yan hurriedly nodded and bowed to express his thanks. The old man gently waved his hand and said again, "Let's not talk about it. The first elder has high expectations for you. As long as you focus on your cultivation and do not follow in the footsteps of your ancestor, it will be fine." Ancestor Xiao Xian. What happened to him? The expression in Xiao Yan's eyes immediately hardened when the purple-robed old man's voice sounded. Even the expression on his face became a little gloomy. The first thing he was most concerned about when he came to Xiao Clan was naturally Xiao Xian's situation. However, after hearing the old man's words, Xiao Xian's situation did not seem ideal. Since you are here, you should ask him yourself." The old man was just about to open his mouth when he suddenly turned his head and looked at the sky. A ray of light was rushing over at an extremely fast speed from that spot. In the blink of an eye, it had already appeared in front of this large hole. At the same time, Xiao Yan's eyes were staring intently at the human figure that was formed by the ray of light. The figure was dressed in white and had a head full of long hair. His eyes were pitch black and as deep as the starry sky. There was a faint smile on his handsome face, and his entire body exuded an elegant temperament that was difficult to match with ordinary people. "Haha, little fellow, I haven't seen you for a few years and you have already advanced to Source Ancestor. Not bad. Looks like you have found what you want." Xiao Xian could not help but click his tongue in admiration when he sensed the aura in Xiao Yan's body that was much more powerful than his own. At this moment, Xiao Yan's tensed heart finally relaxed when he saw that Xiao Xian was fine. "Ancestor Xiao Xian, have you been well these past few years?" Xiao Yan asked with a face full of concern after he heaved a sigh of relief. The purple-robed old man by the side turned his eyes when these words were uttered. He immediately looked at Xiao Xian. The latter appeared to have not sensed anything as he smiled and nodded to Xiao Yan. After which, he turned his eyes to the old man by the side. He cupped his hands together in a respectful manner and said, "Elder Li, long time no see. Haha, ever since you passed by my ancient hall, you haven't come here again." Xiao Xian smiled non-committally when he heard this. The old man glanced indifferently at the two people in front of him before he turned around and walked into the hall behind him. At the same time, his indifferent voice sounded again. "All right, I don't receive guests here. Since you are here, I will not find anyone to lead the way for him. You can lead him there." After speaking, the old man's figure disappeared into the hole. Xiao Xian smiled and nodded. After which, he looked at Xiao Yan in front of him with a smile. The latter's face was filled with suspicion. He could not help but frown as he looked at Xiao Xian and asked doubtfully, "Where are we going?" "To see the leader of the Xiao clan." Xiao Xian nodded and smiled. "The leader of the Xiao clan, huh? That's right. I can only be considered to have truly entered the Xiao clan after meeting him." Xiao Yan chuckled softly and slowly lifted his head. He looked at the stone stairs that climbed up behind the hall. In a trance, a low murmur was slowly emitted from his mouth. Chapter 1380. In front of the ancient city hall, Xiao Yan was led by Xiao Xian into the clan. Bai Hua and Lianer were stopped by Xiao Li in the ancient city hall due to their status. Hence, only Xiao Yan and his granddaughter were left. Xiao Yan followed behind Xiao Xian. The rest of the journey was quite smooth. They passed by quite a number of pavilions and met a couple of elders of the Xiao clan. These elders were just like Elder Xiao Li from earlier. They did not appear to be surprised by Xiao Yan's arrival. However, their eyes contained some surprise when they looked at him. Xiao Yan was used to this. After welcoming them with a smiling face, he followed Xiao Xian's lead and hurried deep into the Xiao clan. "Ancestor Xiao Xian, may I know how you have been in the Xiao clan during these few years?" From Elder Xiao Li's tone earlier, it seems. Haha, Elder Xiao Li has a cold character. Other than the clan head and a few elders, he is like this to everyone in the clan. Don't take it to heart. Along the way, Xiao Yan recalled how Xiao Li had mentioned Xiao Xian when warning him. He hesitated in his heart. However, Xiao Xian did not seem to mind as he laughed softly. Xiao Yan frowned. The manner in which Xiao Li had looked at Xiao Xian earlier did not seem to be due to his character. Instead, it gave Xiao Yan a harsh feeling. He was not unfamiliar with that gaze. However, Xiao Xian was unwilling to mention it at this moment. Hence, he could only drop the subject. Xiao Yan withdrew his thoughts. His gaze swept over Xiao Xian's body. Immediately, he rotated his eyebrows and asked, Ancestor Xiao Xian's current cultivation has already reached the peak of the Origin Emperor, right? With the enormous resources of the Xiao clan, it would be too embarrassing if I still could not reach the peak of the Origin Emperor. Unfortunately, I lack the latter half of the third scroll of the Origin skill. It is likely that it will be very difficult for my cultivation to break through. However, since you are already here, this is not important. Ha ha! Xiao Xian smiled in an unconcerned manner when he heard this. His expression was a little disappointed. Without the Guiyuan skill, it was likely that his cultivation could only be as stagnant as it was back in the Doqi continent. If he were to forcefully break through, the result would be. Tianju was an example. As for searching for it, Xiao Xian could only hope for a fluke. Searching for a fragment of a cultivation technique in the entire continent was like searching for a needle in a haystack. It was obvious how slim the chances were. Fortunately, Xiao Yan had come to the Xiao clan. As long as Xiao Yan was fine, he would not be too concerned about his own cultivation. Compared to himself, he was more concerned about Xiao Yan's situation. However, even if he thought this way, Xiao Yan would not think the same. Is that so? Xiao Yan curled his mouth and smiled when he heard Xiao Xian's words. He flipped his hand and a black leather parchment that was half the size of a palm landed in his hand. At the same time, Xiao Xian, who was originally flying forward, suddenly paused. The expression on his face changed as he suddenly turned around. His gaze instantly landed on Xiao Yan's hand. His originally calm heart began to ripple at this moment. In this way, I believe that there is no need to worry about ancestors' cultivation. Xiao Yan's eyes flickered as he stared at Xiao Xian in front of him. Although he had spoken those words in a relaxed manner, Xiao Yan was not some naive and foolish little fellow. At this moment, he had recalled the words that Xiao Li had said earlier. In his heart, he could roughly understand what the so-called footsteps meant. Immediately, a cold and indifferent feeling rose in his heart because of this. Huff huff! At the same time, an invisible hurricane suddenly gathered around Xiao Xian's body. Even the area where the two of them were at was stirred up by a storm. In the distant pavilions, some of the Xiao clan's disciples sensed the commotion, and their expressions could not help but change. Xiao Xian slowly extended his hand and caught the black fragment that was close to him. The black leather parchment was light and thin and did not have any temperature. However, when it landed in Xiao Xian's hand, it caused his face to flush red. The emotions in his heart almost uncontrollably appeared on his face. Although Xiao Yan did not say anything, he knew that Xiao Xian was unable to hide the agitation in his heart. The only regret in Xiao Xian's legendary life was the Returnance Art. At this very moment, the last fragment of the Returnance Art was in his hand. How could he not be excited? It was a long while later before Xiao Xian's stiff body gradually relaxed. His breathing was somewhat trembling as he exhaled. Immediately, he put away the black skin paper in his hand. His eyes were somewhat red as he looked at Xiao Yan in front of him. The expression on his face gradually recovered its calmness as he said, "Let's go and see the clan leader." The moment he turned around, a sharp aura filled with murderous intent spread out from his body. Even Xiao Yan behind Xiao Xian involuntarily cast a sideways glance when he sensed this. This sharp aura was something that he admitted that even he was unable to achieve. At this moment, Xiao Xian seemed to be different. After the two of them returned to their previous state, Xiao Yan followed closely behind Xiao Xian and flew forward. A moment later, the two of them gradually descended and landed in front of a fiery red hole. At this moment, there were many disciples of the Xiao clan standing guard outside the fiery red hall. Their vigilant gazes constantly scanned the surroundings. As expected of the Xiao clan, even the disciples guarding the hall possessed such strength. If these people were placed in the southern region, they would be a powerful faction. Xiao Yan could not help but exclaim in admiration as his gaze swept across the young people present. These people's cultivation were all above King Yuan, and there was no lack of origin emperors among them. It was already considered good to possess such strength among the younger generation. The reason why they were here was naturally because they represented the flourishing bloodline of the Xiao clan. From a certain point of view, this was also a display of the great foundation of the Xiao clan to the outside world. Haha, this is only what you see. Let's go. Since you are here, I believe the clan leader already knows. Don't let him wait for too long. Xiao Xian smiled and said. Xiao Yan nodded gently. Soon after, the two of them walked into the hall. At the same time, in another area within the Xiao clan, Xiao Chu Hang, whose complexion had slightly improved, was sleeping on the bed. A young man was seated on a chair beside the bed. Behind him, a middle-aged man was standing respectfully with his head lowered. What did you say? Xiao Yan? Is he the foreign clan member that Xiao Mingyuan mentioned? The unknown Xiao Yan who injured Xiao Chuhang? In the hall, the young man frowned after hearing the middle-aged man's description. He turned his head and stared at the middle-aged man who was bowing in front of him as he spoke in a deep voice. There should be no mistake. When I passed by the ancient hall, that brat was chatting with Elder Xiao Li. After which, Xiao Xian personally went to welcome him. I believe that he is Xiao Yan. Bang! Just as the middle-aged man finished speaking, the chair under the young man suddenly exploded with a bang. The young man abruptly stood up with a gloomy expression. Xiao Yan, Xiao Xian. What a pair of grandfather and grandson. We have yet to settle the old debt from back then, yet you have injured my younger brother. The both of you are really the first within the Xiao clan. The young man slowly narrowed his eyes. As a cold glint flickered in his eyes, a surging energy aura involuntarily spread out from his body. A moment later, a sinister voice was faintly spat out. Let's go to the main hall. I want to personally meet these two. Chapter 1381. Following behind Xiao Xian, Xiao Yan successfully passed through the tight guards outside the hall. He then gently pushed open the door. Creak! After the door to the hall was opened, an exceptionally majestic space appeared in Xiao Yan's sight. Xiao Xian hurriedly walked in when the door to the hall was opened. An old man coincidentally walked out. Xiao Xian hurriedly bowed to the person in front of him and said, This old man is Xiao Yan. Third elder. Behind him, Xiao Yan also saw the human figure at the same time the latter walked out. His eyebrows were lifted slightly before he immediately smiled and bowed in the same manner as the former. Hee little guy, in just a few short years, your growth has surprised the entire Xiao clan. The old man's eyes paused on Xiao Xian when he saw the two people in front of him. A regretful expression flashed across his face. Immediately, he looked at Xiao Yan behind Xiao Xian and spoke with a face full of praise. The old man was Xiao Mingyuan, who had taken Xiao Xian away in the extreme south. Now that they had met again, the old man seemed the same as before. However, Xiao Yan was no longer the returnant's brat from before. Even with the entire continent in perspective, he could be regarded as a true expert now. Long time no see. Senior, you're becoming more and more vigorous with age. Xiao Yan smiled. He was rather polite. Xiao Mingyuan had saved him and Xiao Xian before after all. Coupled with the fact that he was an elder of the Xiao clan, they might need his help in the future. Xiao Yan should treat him with respect. Haha, you can go in. I have matters to attend to, so I won't be accompanying you. The patriarch is still waiting inside. Xiao Mingyuan parted his mouth and smiled. He immediately lifted his foot and walked past the two of them. He swiftly left in front of the respectful gazes of the guards outside the door. After which, Xiao Yan and Xiao Mingyuan exchanged glances with each other. They smiled slightly and slowly walked into the large hall. At this moment, there were nearly 10+ figures seated in the large hall. Looking at their faces, it was clear that they were quite old. Their expressions were indifferent and did not reveal any surprised expression because of the arrival of Xiao Yan's group. It was as though they had already expected this. A well-built middle-aged man with grayish-white hair was seated at the leader's seat in the large hall. The latter's chiseled face was filled with a smile from beginning to end. Although he appeared a little unrestrained, no one present revealed any dissatisfaction. Clearly, they were clearly aware of the importance of this middle-aged man in front of everyone. Everyone in the hall finally threw their indifferent gazes over as the footsteps in the hall grew closer. This was especially the case when everyone saw Xiao Xian. Many pairs of eyes involuntarily flickered. They hesitated for an instant before shifting their gazes away from Xiao Xian. Immediately, they looked at Xiao Yan behind him. However, when Xiao Yan's exceptionally young face was reflected in the eyes of everyone in the large hall, the gazes of everyone in the hall involuntarily stilled. Many pairs of turbid eyes that were filled with the vicissitudes of life flashed with surprise. Compared to the information that they knew, the appearance of the person in front of them appeared to be much younger. Xiao Yan greets the patriarch. Xiao Yan did not care about those slightly strange gazes. He followed Xiao Xian's footsteps and walked straight to the center of the hall. His gaze directly looked at the gray-haired, middle-aged man at the main seat. The moment he entered the hall, he faintly sensed a spiritual pressure probing him. The source of this pressure was the gray-haired middle-aged man, who seemed somewhat out of place with everyone else. When the middle-aged man saw Xiao Yan, he was also slightly surprised. However, in comparison, he hid it very well and did not reveal it. His gaze slowly swept over Xiao Yan. As he smiled and nodded, the astonishment in his eyes grew even more intense. Haha, little fellow, you're not bad. I didn't expect you to reach the source ancestor level at such a young age. Such talent is truly rare. The middle-aged man smiled as he looked at the respectful Xiao Yan below. Patriarch, you flatter me. This junior was just lucky. Xiao Yan's expression did not change, but he was inwardly surprised. This middle-aged man was indeed the patriarch of the Xiao clan. With a single glance, he could see through the depths of his cultivation. As thoughts swirled in his mind, Xiao Yan's gaze also swept over the middle-aged man at the main seat. He was somewhat shocked to discover that when he looked over, the middle-aged man's body seemed to be shrouded in a layer of mist. It was extremely hazy, making it difficult for Xiao Yan to see his face clearly, let alone probe his aura. He's actually so powerful. Xiao Yan did not doubt that the middle-aged man's cultivation was at least comparable to Sword Saint Yulan of the Ouyang clan. Haha, whether it's talent or luck, as long as you can obtain it, it's your ability. Furthermore, the middle-aged man acted as though he did not hear Xiao Yan's probing. His mouth praised. However, his expression suddenly became serious when he reached the end of his words. His body slowly stood up. At the same time, the group of Xiao clan's elders seated below also stood up one after another. Numerous gazes gathered on Xiao Yan like spotlights. The middle-aged man mused for a moment before speaking with a serious expression. Since you've come to our Xiao clan today, it means that you've acknowledged us and yourself. Now I, Xiao Yuheng, and the elders present here, on behalf of the entire Xiao clan, extend an official invitation to Xiao Yan. Are you willing to officially join the Xiao clan from today onwards? As the words from Xiao Yuheng's mouth sounded, a faintly discernible pressure began to surround Xiao Yan in the eyes of those elders present when they looked at Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan involuntarily knit his brows when he sensed the special meaning contained within those gazes. If it was an ordinary person, it was likely that he would have bowed and acknowledged the pressure from so many experts. However, at this moment, the strange gazes that he received caused a feeling of rejection to surge out of Xiao Yan's heart. It was not impossible for him to join the Xiao clan. However, it was not in his character to submit to the pressure of outsiders. If these fellows continued to act in this manner, he might make other choices. Of course, we'll respect your wishes. If you're not willing to return to the clan for the time being, there's no need to force yourself. You can slowly get used to it in the future. If you're willing, you can also stay. It won't be too late to join us when you're willing. Appearing to have sensed the change in Xiao Yan's emotions, Xiao Yuheng hurriedly coughed softly. At the same time that the words were spat out from his mouth, the somewhat strange atmosphere within the large hall finally became relaxed. If that's the case, thank you, clan leader. Chapter 1382. At the same time that Xiao Yan's group entered the large hall, on the other side, Xiao Mingyuan walked out of the hall and headed east. Along the way, he passed by quite a number of pavilions and buildings until he reached a street where he saw two human figures swiftly rushing over from a distance. Only then did he gently raise his eyebrows, slowly paused his footsteps and quietly stood where he was. Very quickly, two human figures approached from afar and arrived in front of Xiao Mingyuan. The two human figures, who originally wanted to rush past this place at top speed, lowered their bodies to the ground because of the ladder. Their faces revealed respectful expressions. The two figures were a young man and a middle-aged man. After leaving Xiao Chuhong's place, they headed west and headed straight to the main hall of the Xiao clan. If they didn't see Xiao Mingyuan at this moment, they might not have stopped here. Third Elder. When they saw Xiao Mingyuan, the two of them hurriedly went forward and bowed respectfully. Xiao Feng, what happened? From the looks of it, are you going to meet the patriarch? Xiao Mingyuan nodded slightly and said as if he didn't know. I heard that one of the two outsiders that Third Elder found a few years ago has returned to the clan today, and even alarmed many elders. As the heir of the Xiao clan, I should go and take a look. Hearing this, the young man chuckled. When he lowered his head, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Haha, your brother was seriously injured in Xiao City. Instead of taking care of him, you actually care about an outsider. Xiao Feng, this isn't your style. Xiao Mingyuan smiled indifferently.
Looking at the gloomy face of the latter, he slowly shook his head and said again, I originally wanted to find you.
This old man originally wanted to look for you. However, since I've bumped into you here, it'll save me the trouble of making an extra trip. I've only come here to pass on a message to you. Listen well. Pass a message. Xiao Feng frowned and raised his head to look at the person in front of him. There weren't many people in the Xiao clan who could order him to pass a message. Ignoring the change in Xiao Feng's expression, Xiao Mingyuan's face turned serious and said in a dignified tone, From today onwards, Xiao Chuhang will be grounded in the clan for half a year. All of his monthly allowance will be deducted. During this period, he is not allowed to leave the clan and is not allowed to cause trouble. Anyone who violates any of these rules will be punished according to the clan rules. As soon as these words came out, Xiao Feng's gloomy face instantly changed. His emotions also became somewhat agitated.
He stared at Xiao Mingyuan in front of him and said unwillingly, What is the meaning of this, third elder?
It was clearly Xiao Yan who injured my brother. Why is he the one being punished instead? This is unfair. Fair. No one is allowed to fight within Xiao City. This is the clan's rule. Xiao Chuhang ignored the clan's rules and broke the rules knowingly. This is the first reason. He attacked first, and if he can't defeat his opponent, this is the second reason. Do you need this old man to say anything else? Xiao Mingyuan's face was expressionless as he spoke with an indifferent tone. But without monthly allowance and not leaving the clan for half a year, Chuhang, being the second young master of the Xiao clan, he has been fooling around for a long time. Usually, I am too lazy to bother about him on your account. This time around, something has happened to him. This can be considered a lesson. Let him properly reflect on himself during this half a year. As for Xiao Yan, it is best that you forget about finding trouble with him. Xiao Mingyuan raised his hand slightly and interrupted Xiao Feng's words.
Just as the latter was about to refute, he changed the topic and said sternly, Xiao Feng, this old man hopes that you can understand that these words are not passed down to you by the patriarch, nor is it the great elder.
If you continue to be so stubborn, don't blame this old man for being merciless. As soon as Xiao Mingyuan's words fell, the words that were about to come out of Xiao Mingyuan's mouth suddenly became sluggish. At the same time, he seemed to have understood something in an instant. The muscles at the corner of his eyes twitched slightly for a while. After a while, he gritted his teeth and endured the anger in his heart. He trembled and took a deep breath, slowly bent down and said unwillingly, Xiao Feng understands. I hope you really understand. Xiao Mingyuan frowned and said indifferently. Soon after, Xiao Mingyuan flew in the direction he came from. Behind him, Xiao Feng looked at Xiao Mingyuan's departing figure. The fists under his sleeves couldn't help but slowly clench.
The expression on his face became even more gloomy.
Xiao Yan, don't even think about entering my Xiao clan. Young master, don't be rash. The third elder has said it clearly. If you look for Xiao Yan now, I'm afraid that even you won't be able to avoid punishment. Seeing Xiao Feng in such a state, the middle-aged man couldn't help but dissuade him in a low voice. Humph. You go back and guard Chuhang. I will personally deal with this matter. You've injured my younger brother and caused him to be punished. How could this matter be so easily forgotten? But, go ahead. I know what to do. Without waiting for the middle-aged man to speak, Xiao Feng said in an indifferent tone. Soon after, he stomped his foot on the ground and a force burst out from under his feet. As the blue stone shattered, his figure also flew forward and disappeared at the end of the street in the blink of an eye. Looking at the figure that sped away like lightning, the middle-aged man frowned and hesitated for a moment. Only then did he helplessly shake his head. With a soft sigh, he turned around and quickly flew in the direction he came from. On the other side, Xiao Yan and Xiao Mingyuan retreated from the hall. Although Xiao Yuhing had said a lot during this period of time, Xiao Yan didn't have the slightest intention of wavering. Currently, he didn't have a good impression of the Xiao clan. If Xiao Xian wasn't here, he would have turned around and left long ago. Why would he continue to stay here? The two of them retreated from the hall one after another and immediately met Xiao Mingyuan, who had returned. Haha, how was it? Did the little fellow agree to return to the clan? Seeing the two of them, Xiao Mingyuan's gaze immediately landed on Xiao Yan and said with a smile. Now that Xiao Yan had returned, His mission could be considered to have been more than half completed. As long as the former was willing to join the Xiao clan and become a member of the Xiao clan, it would be a good thing for both him and Xiao Yan.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I've disappointed Third Elder.
Hearing this, Xiao Yan lowered his eyebrows and slowly said,
Ah. Xiao Mingyuan was slightly startled.
He didn't expect such an outcome. After hesitating for a moment, he changed his tone and said with a smile, It's fine. After all, you have just returned. It's understandable that you're not used to it. After a while, the First Elder is still in seclusion. When he comes out, he might meet you. We'll talk about everything when the time comes. Xiao Yan smiled and nodded as a response. Xiao Xian by the side also had a respectful expression. However, Xiao Mingyuan didn't pay much attention to Xiao Xian before. At this moment, when he looked at Xiao Xian again, he vaguely felt that there was something different. The latter, who had always kept a low profile, actually had a hidden sharpness. Xiao Mingyuan frowned slightly.
While he was feeling surprised in his heart, a rushing wind sound was suddenly transmitted from behind the few of them. Soon after, a human figure appeared in front of the three of them in the blink of an eye.
A sharp wind instantly bullied Xiao Yan and Xiao Mingyuan. Immediately, the expressions on the faces of the both of them changed slightly. The old man frowned and turned around.
Seeing the figure that had already appeared in front of him, his frown deepened as he said in a serious voice, Xiao Feng, was what I said earlier not clear enough?
Chapter 1383. Haha. Xiao Feng will naturally remember Third Elder's words. However, there is an outsider returning to the clan today and I should come and take a look. Also, Xiao Feng smiled slightly when he heard Xiao Mingyuan's words.
His gaze swept past the latter and swept over the two people beside him.
Immediately, it paused on Xiao Yan. A smile appeared on his face as he said, I believe this must be Xiao Yan. Today, before you even arrived at the main hall, your name has already become famous in my Xiao clan. Although Xiao Feng's face was full of smiles, Xiao Yan could clearly sense the coldness that was emitted from the former's eyes. Immediately, Xiao Yan could not help but feel surprised in his heart.
This was clearly the first time that he had met this fellow. However, there was no need for him to be viewed with such hostility.
He is called Xiao Feng. Xiao Chu Hang, who was heavily injured by you earlier, is his younger brother. Xiao Mingyuan stared at Xiao Feng and warned Xiao Yan in a low voice. Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows when he heard this. Only then did he understand. No wonder Xiao Feng was so fierce when he first saw him. It turned out that he was Xiao Chu Hang's elder brother. Previously, I heard that Xiao Chu Hang was called second young master. From the looks of it, this Xiao Feng should be the first young master of the Xiao clan. Xiao Yan nodded his head in a manner that could not be detected. He quietly mused in his heart. Being able to become the heir of the Xiao clan, Xiao Feng's cultivation was clearly extraordinary. Just from this first glance, he would not be weaker than Bai Ruoxuan from the Bai clan. Little fellow, you have to be careful. Xiao Feng and his brother have no one to rely on in the clan. His younger brother is his reverse scale. Today, you have heavily injured Xiao Chu Hang. This fellow will definitely find trouble with you in the future. However, with this old man here today, you can be at ease. Xiao Mingyuan cast a reassuring glance at Xiao Yan. Soon after, his gaze returned to Xiao Feng as he frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, Xiao Feng, now that you have seen them, shouldn't you let them go?
As he spoke, he was about to lead Xiao Yan and pass by the latter.
My younger brother fought with someone in Xiao City today and returned with serious injuries. As far as I know, it was done by Mr. Xiao Yan, right? However, the words that Xiao Feng spat out immediately caused the originally discordant atmosphere in the arena to instantly stiffen. Even some of the guards in the surroundings were secretly astonished as they looked at Xiao Yan in astonishment. Clearly, they understood the meaning behind Xiao Feng's words. He had just entered the Xiao clan, but he had already formed a grudge with the crown prince. This wasn't a good thing. Xiao Feng? Beside Xiao Yan, Xiao Mingyuan's face was slightly gloomy as he said in a serious voice. Haha, please don't worry. I already know what happened. Since Chu Hang was inferior, I naturally have nothing to say. It's just that. Before the few of them could catch their breaths, Xiao Feng continued to speak. My main purpose for coming here is to have a battle with you. At the same time, Xiao Feng suddenly raised an arm and pointed at Xiao Xian beside Xiao Mingyuan, who was beside Xiao Yan. Xiao Xian.
In the surroundings, numerous gazes followed Xiao Feng's direction, and the expressions on their faces gradually turned into astonishment. Even they didn't expect that Xiao Feng would actually request to fight with Xiao Xian. In the past, Xiao Feng had never placed Xiao Xian in his eyes. According to him, someone who couldn't even break through to the origin sect didn't have the qualifications to be his opponent. But today, such unbridled words had actually been broken by Xiao Feng himself. Although that was the case, there were some discerning people present who could see some clues. From Xiao Mingyuan's attitude toward Xiao Feng, the former was clearly unwilling to let Xiao Feng fight with Xiao Yan. Due to Xiao Mingyuan's pressure, the latter was bound to have some concerns. However, at this moment, Xiao Feng had resolutely turned the spearhead towards Xiao Xian beside him. Everyone present understood that Xiao Xian was definitely no match for Xiao Feng given the gap in their cultivation. In this way, if Xiao Xian was unable to accept the challenge, the one who could replace him to fight with Xiao Feng would naturally be Xiao Yan. However, if Xiao Feng cowered and refused to accept the challenge, it was likely that Xiao Feng would use this opportunity to ruthlessly ridicule and provoke him. Regardless of which option it was Xiao Feng's revenge against Xiao Yan. However, if Xiao Yan took the initiative to accept the challenge, all the pressure that Xiao Mingyuan was exerting on him would naturally no longer be a threat. This move of Xiao Feng's was truly a thunderous move. Once everything developed in the direction that Xiao Feng had predicted, it was likely that Xiao Yan's name would truly resound throughout the Xiao clan in the future. However, it was likely that he would become the laughingstock of everyone. If this was all, Xiao Yan would not be concerned. However, what he was concerned about was that Xiao Xian had already joined the Xiao clan and was currently a member of the Xiao clan. He could not possibly affect Xiao Xian's reputation because of himself. In that case, it was likely that he had no choice but to accept this challenge. Xiao Yan's expression immediately turned gloomy when he thought of this. Beside him, Xiao Mingyuan also frowned tightly. However, he felt quite helpless. He had never imagined that Xiao Feng would use such a tactic. In this way, it was likely that an intense battle between the two of them would be unavoidable. Xiao Mingyuan frowned as he swept his gaze back and forth between the two. He could not help but feel somewhat worried in his heart. Although Xiao Yan's cultivation had already stepped into the Genesis Ancestor stage, he was still only a 2-star Genesis Ancestor. In addition, he had already exhausted himself in the battle in Xiao City. If he were to meet Xiao Feng again, it was likely that his chances of victory would be unimaginable. Xiao Feng's eyes remained as sharp as ever as he gazed at the frowning duo. His chilling gaze paused on Xiao Yan as the expression in his eyes grew increasingly cold. The Genesis Qi in the vortex in his body stealthily began to circulate. He could no longer wait to make the person before him pay the price for what he had done. Phew! Xiao Yan exhaled deeply. His expression was stormy as he slowly clenched his fists under his sleeves. He gently lifted his foot, his gaze meeting Xiao Feng's as he lifted his head. All right, I'll accept. However, while everyone present was waiting for the battle between Xiao Yan and Xiao Feng to begin, the white-clothed Xiao Xian by Xiao Yan's side took a step forward. His expression was calm as he looked at Xiao Feng on the opposite side. His clear voice was like a bell that reverberated in the ears of everyone present. Even Xiao Yan, Xiao Mingyuan by his side, and even Xiao Feng at this moment, could not help but be stunned. Ancestor. The expression of Xiao Yan, who had recovered, instantly changed. He was just about to move and block Xiao Yan when the latter turned his head and faintly smiled at him. He used one hand to block the action of Xiao Yan's hand and immediately patted Xiao Yan's shoulder gently. Don't worry, since I dared to accept, I naturally have confidence. Chapter 1384. Xiao Xian's face was indifferent as he gently patted Xiao Yan's shoulder in front of everyone's eyes. The words that were spat out from his mouth caused most of the people present to involuntarily shake their heads. At this moment, it was a little too far-fetched to say that Xiao Yan would forcefully take on the situation. After all, the gap between the two parties' cultivations was clear for all to see. It was basically impossible for an Origin Emperor to fight a Source Zone class expert head-on. Moreover, the person Xiao Xian was facing was the heir of the Xiao clan, Xiao Feng. Xiao Xian, don't force yourself. If you can't beat him, it's not shameful to admit defeat. With me here, I don't think he can do anything overboard. Xiao Mingyuan glanced at Xiao Yan, who was frowning, and hesitated for a moment before speaking to Xiao Xian. Then thank you, Third Elder.
Xiao Xian nodded with a smile and cupped his fists at Xiao Mingyuan. Then he turned his gaze to Xiao Feng, who had a gloomy expression. Xiao Feng, do you plan to fight here or at the martial arts practice field? Xiao Xian turned his head to look at the main hall, which wasn't very far from them, and swept his gaze over the surrounding guards. Fighting in front of the Xiao clan's main hall wasn't something to be proud of. Once a commotion occurred, it would probably alarm the upper echelons of the Xiao clan. Not to mention, there were still guards around. Although they weren't weak, the person with the highest cultivation had barely reached the Origin Emperor. Once the two of them fought, it wouldn't be a small matter. I don't think there's a need to waste time. Let's fight here and end it quickly. I believe there won't really be any commotion. Xiao Feng let out a ferocious smile. His feet suddenly stepped forward as wind swirled around his body. As it rotated, it directly transformed into an invisible wind wall. The wind gradually became thicker. As his body gently shook, the wind wall immediately transformed into an extremely strong wind pressure that swept out in this area. The bodies of some of the surrounding guards immediately trembled as their feet involuntarily retreated. In an instant, the expressions of all the guards changed. When they looked at Xiao Feng, their gazes became solemn. Xiao Feng's strength was indeed worthy of his status as the heir of the crown prince to be able to force them back with just his aura. Since you say you have the confidence to fight me, then let me see what qualifications a mere Origin Emperor has to say such arrogant words. Xiao Feng released his aura and wind swirled around him. He stomped his foot on the ground and shot into the sky. He looked down at Xiao Xian below and sneered. Xiao Xian smiled faintly in response, and a fierce look flashed in his pitch-black eyes. His figure moved, and when he reappeared, he was already in the sky. He clasped two fingers of his right hand together and gently waved them. A gust of wind gathered at his fingertips. It seemed ordinary, but it was accompanied by a sharp whistling sound, and the surrounding Genesis Chi involuntarily gathered towards it. Seeing this scene, the guards below immediately cast sidelong glances. Even Xiao Mingyuan's eyes flashed with surprise. To be able to gather wind to such an extent, one could see how deep Xiao Xian's understanding of the Tao of Wind was. It was likely that even Xiao Feng was inferior to him. It seems that he hasn't made no progress in the past few years. With a soft sigh, Xiao Mingyuan looked at Xiao Xian in the sky and couldn't help but reveal a look of regret. If Xiao Xian's cultivation hadn't made any progress, he would have become the most dazzling new star of the Xiao clan. However, all of this had come to an abrupt halt. It seemed that no matter how much Xiao Xian's comprehension of the great Tao of Wind improved, it would ultimately be difficult for him to become a true expert. By the side, Xiao Yan couldn't help but frown again when he heard the old man's sigh. Although he had some guesses about Xiao Xian's situation in the Xiao clan, from Xiao Mingyuan's tone, it was likely far from what he had imagined. Sigh, to be honest, this is also my fault. I originally let you return to the Xiao clan for your own good, but I never thought it would end like this. Xiao Mingyuan slowly sighed, appearing to have seen the resentment in Xiao Yan's heart. His turbid old eyes looked at Xiao Xian, who was currently in the sky. Some shame involuntarily surfaced on his old face. Back then, when Xiao Xian first came to the Xiao clan, we placed great importance on him. After that, he displayed extremely shocking cultivation talent. Relying on the cultivation resources of the clan, his cultivation leapt from an 8-star Origin King to peak Origin King in just 2 years. The old man spoke slowly as bright starlight shone from his eyes. Although this was a matter from a few years ago, it was still astonishing when one thought about it now. In just 2 years, his cultivation has made such a huge leap. Such a terrifying cultivation speed is probably unparalleled across the entire continent for thousands of years. After exhaling a long breath, Xiao Mingyuan focused his mind and continued, "That's right." During that period of time, everyone in the Xiao clan was shocked because of Xiao Xian. For safety reasons, the first elder and the clan leader repeatedly gave orders to completely seal the news within the Xiao clan and not to leak it out. Anyone who disobeyed would be killed without mercy. Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows as soon as these words came out. Even his expression changed slightly. He never thought that the upper echelons of the Xiao clan would be so decisive. In order to seal the news, they even killed their own clansmen. During that period of time, no one in the Xiao clan was allowed to go out. Many people died in the subordinate cities of the Xiao clan, including Xiao City. It could be said that blood flowed like a river. The Xiao clan has already sealed the news, but there are still people spreading it outside? Xiao Yan frowned as he could not help but feel surprised. With the means of the Xiao clan, such a thing could still happen. It was a little ridiculous. No news was spread outside. The reason for killing those people was only out of suspicion.
Xiao Mingyuan slowly shook his head with a helpless expression. Hiss! The expression on Xiao Yan's face suddenly froze. A deep sense of horror instantly surged in his heart.
The reason for killing was only out of suspicion? Even as an expert, such an act was a little too ruthless. Regarding this, Xiao Mingyuan smiled in relief, but he didn't feel too guilty. He said calmly, "Don't be surprised. If it was just one person, such a method is indeed ruthless. But you have to understand that we have to seal all the news at all costs. It's not just for Xiao Xian, but for the future of the entire Xiao clan." With Xiao Xian's cultivation speed at that time, the fate of the Xiao clan would be in his hands if there were no accidents. The law of the jungle. This is an eternal truth in every era. Chapter 1385. However, perhaps it was because joy begets sorrow. What we hoped for did not happen.
After his cultivation reached the peak of the Origin King level, he did not advance at all.
At the beginning, we thought it was just a process of settling down, but it was not like that. Even when the Grand Elder personally investigated him, he was unable to discover anything strange. Xiao Mingyuan sighed deeply. He raised his head again and looked at Xiao Xian in the sky with a complicated expression. Who would have thought that after putting in so much effort, it would end up like this?
Xiao Yan softly laughed when he heard these words.
He had also experienced such a situation when he was young.
Now that he thought about it, the feeling of having the hopes of the entire clan turn into a bubble with a bang was something that he could understand a little.
After all, it was just as Xiao Mingyuan had said earlier. This world was one where the strong preyed on the weak. As for the first elder, it was naturally impossible for him to see anything. The returnance art was a cultivation method, and there was nothing wrong with Xiao Xian's body. Even if his body was cut open, it would be impossible to discover anything strange. It was also after that his prestige in the clan grew even lower. Even the elders in the clan rarely paid attention to him, and even those who originally supported him treated him like strangers. Some of them even ridiculed him a little. If it wasn't for his calm nature, I'm afraid he wouldn't have been able to continue staying in the clan. Xiao Yan only smiled in response. It was just some side talk. They had long since treated it as nothing, so it naturally would not affect them.
Now that the returnance art was complete, he did not want to imagine what kind of interesting expressions those people would have when they saw Xiao Xian break through to the Origin Ancestor level. While the two of them were talking, the atmosphere in the arena, which had gradually solidified, finally exploded at this moment.
Chi! In the sky, Xiao Feng suddenly clenched his fist.
Streams of wind gathered in his palm and swirled around, transforming into an illusory spear. Cool wind gathered on the spear, occasionally emitting the sound of rushing wind.
A chill surged within Xiao Feng's eyes as the long spear condensed.
The long spear in his hand suddenly shook and a sharp rushing wind sound appeared.
Immediately, the body of the spear twisted and directly drew an invisible dragon in the empty space. It was accompanied by a shockingly frightening wind pressure. With a roar, it wrapped around the long spear and shot explosively towards Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian calmly gazed at the invisible spear rushing towards him. He lifted his right hand, and the Genesis Chi in his body began to circulate without hesitation. With a thought, an invisible sword rapidly materialized in the air in front of him. Genesis Chi rapidly poured into it, and he slashed out with the sword. Bas! Two invisible forces suddenly collided in the void, and a low explosion immediately rang out. Waves of wind swept out, and the giant dragon and sword were completely buried in the wind and waves. Immediately after, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out again. Xiao Feng's body suddenly shot out from the huge wind and waves. He held a long spear in his hand and stabbed towards Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian, let's settle the old score between you and me here. Xiao Feng laughed angrily. His body jerked, and an afterimage remained where he was. When he reappeared, he was already not far in front of Xiao Xian. His long spear danced, and the wind wildly danced. The sharp sound of the wind turned into countless spear shadows that ruthlessly shot towards every part of Xiao Xian's body. Below, Xiao Yan scrunched his brows when he heard Xiao Feng's words. He cast a surprised look at Xiao Mingyuan and asked in a puzzled voice, "What? What's this?" So there was already a conflict between my ancestor and Xiao Feng before this?
Not necessarily. If we want to talk about it in detail, it was because of Xiao Chuhang.
It's him again. Xiao Yan, who originally didn't have a good impression of Xiao Chuhang, felt even more disgusted with him. Regarding this, Xiao Mingyuan knew that he could only smile bitterly and say, Xiao Feng and his brother lost their parents when they were young. Since they grew up, they had suffered a lot. As the elder brother, Xiao Feng doted on his younger brother a lot. Ever since he became the heir of the Xiao clan, he was even more so. But because of this, when Xiao Xian was valued by the upper echelons of the clan, Xiao Feng, as the heir, was given the cold shoulder. Xiao Chuhang felt that it was unfair, so he took advantage of Xiao Xian's breakthrough to barge in. However, because Xiao Xian's cultivation coincidentally broke through at that time, he was heavily injured by the backlash, which resulted in a conflict between him and Xiao Feng.
After that, the two of them were unable to clash due to the obstruction of the upper echelons of the clan.
Xiao Chuhang was also punished and focused on cultivation, which allowed him to break through the shackles of the origin sect. In the end, this could be considered a blessing in disguise. Xiao Mingyuan slowly shook his head as he looked at the cold face of Xiao Feng in the sky. If he only cared about his strength as the heir of the Xiao clan, he wouldn't be able to go far. Xiao Yan couldn't help but laugh when he heard that Xiao Chuhang was reaping what he sowed. He raised his head and looked at the battle in the sky. Xiao Xian's expression didn't change in the face of Xiao Feng's fierce attack. With a twist of his wrist, countless sword images rapidly appeared around him. As he retreated, the sword images also pierced forward, colliding with the countless spears and blocking the former's attacks. Xiao Xian had lived for 1,000 years and had experienced countless bloody battles. Compared to Xiao Feng, who had been peacefully cultivating in the Xiao clan, Xiao Xian's battle experience was extremely rich. If the two of them were to fight, the latter would definitely not be Xiao Xian's match. The chilliness in Xiao Feng's eyes grew even colder when he saw that Xiao Xian was actually so calm. He waved his large sleeve and wrapped it around the spear handle. His entire body supported the spear as he shot forward while a hurricane whistled. Even space itself was forcefully torn apart as a huge crack was formed along the way. Chi! The spear darted out like a bolt of lightning, but just as it was about to hit Xiao Xian's chest, the latter quickly lifted his hands and formed a seal with his fingertips. Genesis Chi circulated and a cool breeze gathered, turning into an invisible sword in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, incomparably sharp sword Chi surged out, causing the surrounding space to hum and distort. Ha! A wisp of surprise instantly appeared on Xiao Mingyuan's old face when he noticed the sharp sword Chi. Although Xiao Xuanfeng's aura was strong, it had to be said that it was even more shocking to be able to utilize the power of the wind to emit such sharp and domineering sword Chi. Clang! The invisible spear collided with the sword body, producing a crisp sound of collision. At the same time, the sword Chi on the spear shot out along both sides of the spear body, tearing through space and heading straight for Xiao Feng's face. Humph! As the sword Chi shot over, Xiao Feng's expression changed. He couldn't care about the spear anymore. He waved his sleeves and released the spear body. An invisible gust of wind covered his sleeves and blocked the sword Chi. At the same time, Xiao Xian twisted his wrist, and the invisible sword in front of him collided with the invisible spear. Then, the invisible spear suddenly shattered with a crack, turning into countless whirlwinds that scattered in all directions.
Prince Xiaofeng, since your weapon has been destroyed, I believe that this battle should have come to an end.
With a faint smile, Xiao Xian retreated and landed on the ground below. When Xiao Feng returned to his senses, he had already seen the shattered spear. When he looked at Xiao Xian again, his face had completely darkened. If you want to end this battle, you have to defeat me. With a low roar, Xiao Feng's body in the air shook violently. Genesis Chi surged out from his body, and in the void around him, distorted invisible curtains rapidly formed. Then, he raised his hands to his chest and interlocked his fingers in a seal. Gusts of wind also gathered above his head. This is the wind god's fury. Xiao Yan's expression instantly changed when he saw this scene in the empty space. The seal that Xiao Feng was using was no different from the one that Xiao Chuhang had used in Xiao City earlier. It was undoubtedly the wind god's fury. However, it was fine if it was merely the battle earlier. Once the wind god's fury was used, it was likely that Xiao Xian would have difficulty enduring it given his current cultivation. Xiao Feng, this battle doesn't have much meaning to begin with. Why are you still entangling yourself?
You should know that you will be severely punished if you injure your clansman for no reason. Whether it was because of the guilt he felt toward Xiao Xian or because of Xiao Yan's existence, Xiao Mingyuan's tone was even harsher. However, how could Xiao Feng be willing to stop so easily? Third Elder, until now, I have never admitted defeat, nor have I exhausted my strength. Therefore, the battle hasn't ended, and it can't be considered as injuring someone for no reason. Xiao Xian, if you want to end this battle, one of us must fall. Wind. God's fury. A vast and mighty pressure that was filled with a majestic aura spread apart. The expressions of the surrounding guards changed drastically. Numerous figures swiftly withdrew. Even some of the elders, who were observing the battle from afar, nodded their heads slightly in response to this pressure. Regardless of how overbearing Xiao Feng's character was, there was no need to say anything about his strength. This was something that no one could deny. Bas. Below, Xiao Yan took a step forward and blocked in front of Xiao Xian. A powerful pressure that was not inferior to the former spread out. Immediately, the expressions of everyone present changed drastically. Just Xiao Feng's pressure alone was already so shocking. If Xiao Yan was added, the result would be unimaginable if the two of them clashed. Is he going to attack? Staring at Xiao Yan, who was about to attack, a cold light flashed in Xiao Feng's eyes. The aura on his body also became increasingly powerful. However, in the next moment, just as Xiao Yan was about to attack. Huh? Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows. Just as he turned his head, Xiao Xian's hand stopped him once again. Xiao Xian's face was still calm. Before Xiao Yan could speak, Xiao Xian slowly said, "You have had a hard time along the way. Rest well. Let me end my own battle." After saying that, Xiao Xian took a dozen steps forward without caring about the expression on Xiao Yan's face. Then, under the gazes of the surrounding people, he slowly raised his right hand. As he put two fingers together, Xiao Mingyuan's expression suddenly changed. He raised his head and looked over. At this moment, a huge tornado had formed above Xiao Xian's head in the blink of an eye, and then, with a wave of his sword finger, the huge tornado above Xiao Xian's head turned into a huge illusory image in the blink of an eye under the disbelieving gazes of everyone present. This illusory image was Fury of the Wind God. Chapter 1386. Wind God's Fury. It's the Wind God's Fury again. Moreover, he hasn't formed any seals yet. How is this possible? On the battlefield, the expressions of the guards below changed drastically when the illusory image above Xiao Xian's head formed in the blink of an eye. They could not help but cry out in surprise, especially when they saw that Xiao Xian had formed the Wind God's Fury in an instant. Their hearts were filled with disbelief. Xiao Mingyuan's old face was also filled with astonishment. However, compared to the younger generation of the Xiao clan, he understood that although the Wind God's Fury was an intent class Do skill, it was not impossible to form it in an instant. However, in addition to needing a huge amount of Genesis Chi to support it, one's understanding of the Wind God's Fury must have reached a level that most people could not achieve. This made Xiao Mingyuan's heart even more shocked. At the same time, the pity he felt for Xiao Xian deepened. Xiao Xian, who was so calm and had such astonishing talent in all aspects, had his cultivation stopped at the peak of the Origin Emperor level. This was really hard to accept. Sigh. With a deep frown and a sigh, the old man's body could not help but tremble. His pair of old eyes were slightly red as he looked at the figure in front of him, who was as carefree as a cool breeze. A wave of resentment actually rose in his heart for him. It's really, fate makes fools of people. By the side, Xiao Yan also felt a wave of surprise when he saw Xiao Xian's reaction. It seemed that he had underestimated his ancestor. He could not help but mock himself in his heart. Compared to Xiao Xian, his powerful battle strength was almost entirely due to the existence of the heavenly flame. On the other hand, Xiao Xian relied on his own strength. In this regard, Xiao Yan admitted that he was inferior. On the battlefield, as Xiao Xian's Wind God's Fury gathered, the expression on Xiao Feng's face instantly turned ugly. He had also practiced the Wind God's Fury, and his understanding of it naturally far surpassed ordinary people. The fact that Xiao Xian could form the Wind God's Fury in an instant was proof of his strength. If his cultivation had not stopped at the peak of the Origin Emperor level, he would have no chance of winning today's battle. Xiao Feng's aura trembled involuntarily as he calmed down.
He rejoiced in his heart as he slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again in the next instant, a cold glint shot out from them. A cold and resolute intent surged from the depths of his eyes. Wind God's fury, huh? So what? The gap between the Origin Emperor and the Origin Ancestor can't be crossed. You will undoubtedly lose this battle. Xiao Feng stood in the air with his hands clasped together. He glared at Xiao Xian angrily as the enormous illusory figure behind him slowly leaned forward. At the same time, a shocking pressure descended from the sky. On the ground below, Xiao Yan sensed the pressure that spread from Xiao Feng's body. The expression on his face also changed. He was indeed worthy of being the heir of the Xiao clan. Compared to Xiao Chuhang, the wind god's fury that Xiao Feng used was at least twice as strong. Xiao Yan admitted that even if he was the one facing this attack from Xiao Feng, it was likely that he would have to go all out. By the side, Xiao Mingyuan's turbid eyes were fixed on the situation on the battlefield. Wisps of Genesis Qi quietly circulated around the surface of his body. Once the situation changed, he would immediately take action. No matter what, he had to ensure Xiao Xian's safety. Wind. God. Fury. Xiao Feng's voice carried a vast and mighty echo as it reverberated across the sky. There were already quite a number of people standing on the two sides of the street and in the pavilions. Most of them were the various elders of the Xiao clan. They had already guessed in their hearts that if Xiao Mingyuan did not intervene, it was likely that only Xiao Yan by his side would be able to block Xiao Feng's attack. Terrifying wind pressure viciously slammed into the faces of the crowd below, causing several people to involuntarily retreat. Some even fell to the ground on their butts, unable to withstand the wind pressure. Even Xiao Yan had a grave expression on his face at this moment. The Genesis Qi in his body swiftly circulated, as if he was already prepared to act. At this moment, only Xiao Xian's expression remained calm in the face of the incoming wind pressure. The gale automatically dispersed when it was 100 feet away from him, as if it was waiting for the furious god in the sky to descend. If one was paying attention, one would discover that Xiao Xian's face had unknowingly turned a little pale. What is he doing? Why isn't he taking action? A group of elders had unknowingly filled the main hall, and the patriarch of the Xiao clan, Xiao Yuheng, was standing in front of the door. Everyone's eyes were gathered on Xiao Yan and Xiao Mingyuan. Of course, the majority were still waiting for Xiao Yan to take action. After all, Xiao Feng was the Origin sect master. Have you guys noticed that another force seems to be gathering around him? Xiao Yuheng's brows were tightly scrunched together. No one could clearly see the situation around Xiao Xian under the God of Fury's pressure, but he could still faintly sense something. Unfortunately, the elders didn't expect Xiao Xian to resist Xiao Feng with his own strength. No one responded, and Xiao Yuheng could only shake his head helplessly. These old fellows are still stubborn. On the ground, Xiao Xian calmly watched the giant illusory figure approaching, and a fierce look quietly surged in the depths of his eyes. A strong pressure descended from the sky, and Xiao Yan and Xiao Mingyuan grew increasingly nervous. They even had the urge to take action. If Xiao Xian wasn't as calm as before, they would have already taken action. Ancestor? Xiao Yan couldn't help but clench his fists even tighter under his sleeves as he stared at the figure in front of him. His forehead was also covered in sweat due to the nervousness in his heart. Xiao Xian, you've lost. A voice filled with pressure resounded like a final judgment. Xiao Feng's body suddenly jerked, and a terrifying storm suddenly swept out, closing in on Xiao Xian. The giant illusory figure finally descended in front of Xiao Xian at this moment. Xiao Xian, whose eyes were as calm as before, slowly raised his head. His eagle-like gaze instantly collided with the former's. The sword finger on his right hand gently rotated, and a calm voice was slowly uttered. Green cleansing sword art. Dao heaven. One sword. Buzz. Almost at the same time, the illusory figure above Xiao Xian's head suddenly raised its hands and clenched them in the air. A giant sword that towered into the sky suddenly appeared in the originally empty space. At the same time, a terrifying sword chi storm swept across the world, slashing countless sharp sword scars on the ground below. At this moment, everyone present, including the elders standing in front of the main hall and Xiao Yuheng, had a drastic change in expression. Everyone stared at the scene with their eyes wide open, and their hearts were filled with shock. It was only a moment later that they couldn't help but cry out involuntarily. This is the Great Way of the Sword. Peak. Chapter 1387. Green Cleansing Sword Technique. Dao Heaven Sword. Xiao Xian's clear cry sounded in the sky. He suddenly lifted his sword finger. Soon after, the illusory figure above his head, which was holding the invisible huge sword, suddenly thrust the huge sword down furiously. Buzz! The sword aura surged and shattered the entire area, forming countless spatial cracks. A couple of elders from the Shao clan immediately appeared outside the arena and joined forces to seal off the area where the two of them were. Even so, the muffled explosion that was emitted when the sword aura collided with the energy wall still caused countless people to tremble in fear. Chi! In the next instant, without any room to breathe, the invisible giant sword, which was accompanied by an incomparably sharp sword aura, instantly pierced through the wind god's fury that Xiao Feng had unleashed. Xiao Feng's entire body was instantly blasted to the ground below. The blue stone was annihilated and turned into a pile of dust. As the airwave swept over, it actually turned the surrounding 100 feet into ruins. In an instant, the aggressive fury of the wind god was forcefully destroyed. Even Xiao Feng was seriously injured. The storm dissipated under the nervous gazes of the upper echelons of the Shao clan outside the arena. Everyone's eyes quickly gathered at one spot, and their faces were filled with shock. At this moment, Xiao Feng was lying on the ground without any aura. He was in a miserable state. However, Xiao Xian still had a calm expression on his face. The fury of the wind god was still above his head, and an invisible huge sword was suspended high above Xiao Feng's head. If Xiao Xian had not intentionally restrained his sword aura, it was likely that the sword aura would have already landed on Xiao Feng's body below. If this sword of mine lands, you will definitely die. Therefore you have lost. Xiao Xian's calm voice slowly sounded. The sword finger that Xiao Xian was about to slash down trembled slightly and gradually loosened. At the same time, the illusory figure above his head and the huge sword also disappeared. I have lost. Xiao Feng, who was lying in the dust, could not help but reveal a self-mocking expression on his pale face when he heard this. His eyes gradually turned red. A long while later, he finally let out an unwilling laugh. He did not expect Xiao Xian to be able to comprehend the sword Great Dao while mastering the Great Dao of Wind. Wah! When Xiao Feng's self-mocking voice sounded, it immediately caused an uproar in the arena. Countless gazes were fixed on Xiao Feng, who was lying in the ruins below. Their gazes were filled with disbelief. It was hard to imagine that the crown prince before them would be defeated by an origin emperor. It was simply unbelievable. Of course, the person who was even more shocked, naturally, was Xiao Yan. There was no doubt that Xiao Feng's cultivation was not inferior to Ouyang Miao's. Xiao Feng's cultivation, who was in front of him, who was an existence. Xiao Xian was an existence. What was even more shocking was Xiao Xian's current state. This seemingly thin figure before them had actually grasped the energy of 2 grand daras. This was something that no one present in the surroundings had expected. The energy of the Grand Dao was the most difficult energy to control in the heavens and the earth. So long as an ordinary person was able to grasp one, then it would be sufficient to become an expert and be respected by all. From a certain point of view, the energy of the Grand Dao was the standard to measure an expert. However, to most people, comprehending the energy of the Grand Dao was already extremely difficult, so grasping 2 types of energy of the Grand Dao at the same time was simply unimaginable. Of course, nothing was absolute. In the entire continent, some heaven-defying figures in the cultivation world could also rely on their own abilities to control 2 types of Grand Dao energy. However, the number of such people could be counted on one hand. Most of them were experts who had made a name for themselves in the continent many years ago, or core disciples of those super forces. There was naturally no need to mention the former. Once the latter matured, he would definitely become an expert that stood at the peak of the continent in the future. However, Xiao Xian had actually grasped 2 types of Grand Dao energy. Once news of this spread, it would probably cause a mighty uproar in the central region. Some of the Shao clan's elders present involuntarily shook their heads when they thought of this. Even Xiao Mingyuan, who was standing beside Xiao Yan, had a bitter expression on his old face. He naturally understood what it meant to possess 2 types of Great Dao strength. Even though this was the case, Xiao Xian's shocking training talent no longer possessed any value. Huff! Xiao Xian's face was ghastly pale. He slowly exhaled as cold sweat dripped from his forehead. When he turned around, he staggered. Xiao Yan, who had been paying attention to the former, immediately flashed forward and helped him up. Ancestor, how are you? Xiao Yan's face was filled with worry. Even he was deeply shocked by Xiao Xian's attack. But from the current situation, Xiao Xian seemed to have paid a heavy price. I'm fine. It's just that using 2 Dao powers in succession is a little difficult and the Genesis Qi in my body is exhausted. I'll be fine after a few days of rest. Xiao Xian forced a smile. He felt rather helpless.
If it weren't for the limitation of his cultivation, he wouldn't have fallen to such a state.
Xiao Yan hurriedly took out a few pills from his storage ring and handed them to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian was taken aback for a moment, but then he grinned. I forgot that you're an alchemist. He unceremoniously received the medicinal pill and immediately consumed it. A warm medicinal strength immediately followed his throat and slid into his body. Soon after, gurgling Genesis Qi swiftly spread along the meridians in his body. A moment later, Xiao Xian's pale face had become slightly better. Only then did he arrive in front of Xiao Mingyuan with Xiao Yan's support.
He bowed slightly to the latter and respectfully said, "Thank you.
I'm sorry to have made Third Elder worry."
Xiao Mingyuan was slightly startled.
He involuntarily smiled bitterly and shook his head.
He immediately glanced at Xiao Yan by his side, and immediately understood something in his heart. He slowly said, "We underestimated your strength. It seems that the reason you didn't show your strength for the past few years was because of this little guy."
During these years, Xiao Xian was no longer valued by the upper echelons of the Xiao clan due to his cultivation. Naturally, it was inevitable that he would be ostracized by some people. After all, he was an outsider.
He was alone and without help in this large clan.
Moreover, his cultivation had stagnated. Quite a number of people had the thought of asking him to leave the Xiao clan.
However, due to Xiao Yan having yet to return to the clan and the insistence of the first elder and the others, he was able to remain safely.
Now that Xiao Yan had returned, Xiao Xian would never allow what happened to him to happen to Xiao Yan again. Even if Xiao Feng didn't invite him to battle today, Xiao Xian was bound to take the initiative to fight in the future and win the right to face Xiao Yan. After the battle, more than half of the Xiao clan's higher-ups had witnessed Xiao Xian's strength. After today, Xiao Xian's name was bound to resound throughout the Xiao clan again. At the same time, Xiao Yan would also quickly enter the eyes of everyone in the Xiao clan. The names of grandfather and grandson would be quickly engraved in everyone's mind. At that time, the old fellows of the Xiao clan would no longer look down on them because they were outsiders. After this battle, their identities would no longer be doubted. Chapter 1388. In front of the main palace, Xiao Yuhing narrowed his eyes as he looked at Xiao Xian.
The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as a look of surprise appeared on his face.
Borrowing the might of the wind god's fury to display the great way of the sword. The power of this sword is something that few below the origin venerate can match. I wonder what kind of scene it would be if he used his full strength. Xiao Yuhing stared intently at Xiao Xian as light flickered in the depths of his eyes.
He muttered to himself for a while before turning his gaze to the elders of the Xiao clan and sternly saying, "Pass on my orders."
From now on, Xiao Xian will be promoted to an inner sect elder. Xiao Yan will be a direct descendant of our clan and receive the same treatment as the crown prince.
What? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of the elders in front of him changed in an instant.
Shocked gazes immediately gathered on Xiao Yuhing's body. Their expressions were filled with disbelief. Clan leader, even if Xiao Xian defeated the crown prince today, he is still an outsider with such a cultivation. How can he bear the position of an inner sect elder? Although Xiao Xian possesses the power of 2 great ways, how could he have defeated Xiao Feng if he hadn't used a surprise attack? Moreover, Xiao Yan's attitude was rather naughty. Since he isn't willing to join our clan, how can he be qualified to be a direct descendant of our clan? Cold and indifferent words rose and fell one after another. Although they had seen the fight earlier, it was clear that they were unwilling to accept everything that had happened in front of them. Their words had greatly belittled Xiao Yan and his granddaughter. Qualified? Xiao Xian possesses the power of 2 great ways. Isn't that qualified? With the cultivation of an origin venerate, he was able to defeat Xiao Feng, who is a 4-star origin venerate. No matter what method he used, his victory is the result. As for Xiao Yan, who in the current continent can subdue a heavenly flame?
Xiao Yuhing's extremely dignified gaze slowly swept across the group of elders in front of him as he spoke in a slightly heavy tone.
It's not necessarily a bad thing for clansmen to reject each other. However, if you stand on the wrong side, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Everyone here is an elder of the clan, so I won't say too much to embarrass you. However, I hope that you all understand that what I said earlier was to inform you, and not to ask for your opinion. After saying those words, Xiao Yuhing turned around and walked into the hall. Behind him, the group of elders looked at each other and were speechless. After a long while, they sighed deeply and left. On the other side, Xiao Yan and his grandson spoke a few more words with Xiao Mingyuan. After bringing the latter away, they prepared to leave as well. But right at this moment, Xiao Feng, who stood up with the help of the two guards, suddenly spoke. Wait! Xiao Yan's footsteps paused as he turned to look at Xiao Feng with an unfriendly expression. Is there anything else? Beside him, Xiao Xian also slowly turned around and calmly looked at the latter. Xiao Feng ignored Xiao Yan's cold eyes. He looked at Xiao Xian by the side and hesitated for a moment before speaking in a serious voice. After a moment of hesitation, he said, Your cultivation can't be stagnant at the Origin Emperor, right? Hearing this, Xiao Yan could not help but raise his eyebrows slightly. He was a little surprised in his heart. Even the first elder of the Xiao clan could not do anything about Xiao Xian's cultivation. Unexpectedly, this fellow still had doubts. Xiao Xian still appeared calm in this regard, but he did not answer Xiao Feng's question. However, when he turned around, the latter vaguely saw that Xiao Xian seemed to have nodded his head slightly. This also confirmed the guess in Xiao Feng's heart. Only after a long while did Xiao Feng let out a disappointed smile. He calmed himself down and moved away from the two guards who were supporting him. Looking at the two figures that had disappeared into the distance, he let out a long sigh and said leisurely, Looks like I didn't lose this battle unjustly. As he sighed softly, his body shook slightly. He forcefully endured the waves of weakness that came from his body, and forcefully relied on his willpower to slowly walk in the direction that he had come from. On the field, the group of Xiao clan guards could not help but feel surprised when they saw this scene. At the same time, a sense of admiration rose in their hearts. After all, Xiao Feng was the heir of the Xiao clan. Even though he had lost miserably in the battle with Xiao Xian, he was still able to rely on his own strength to forcefully drag his severely injured body to walk. This was not something that an ordinary person could do. Creak! A wooden door was slowly pushed open, and a ray of hazy sunlight spread through the gap in the door. Finally, it formed a thin ray of light on the ground. As the wooden door was completely pushed open, the ray of light rapidly expanded. Soon after, two figures that were stretched to different lengths by the sunlight walked in. They were Xiao Xian and Xiao Yan, the grandfather and grandson pair. After an entire day of trifling matters, the sky had already darkened. It was only then that Xiao Yan was able to heave a sigh of relief. Even though the process was a little complicated, he had finally arrived at the Xiao clan. Seeing that Xiao Xian was fine, the greatest worry in his heart had been relieved. Although the worry at the bottom of Xiao Yan's heart had already been resolved, another serious problem still lingered in his heart at this moment. You can stay here for this period of time. I believe that there will be news from the clan leader very soon. Xiao Xian leaned lazily on the chair and let out a long sigh of relief with a slightly tired face. He smiled at Xiao Yan. News. Xiao Yan was just about to nod when he frowned. His face was filled with suspicion. Xiao Xian smiled and said, Everything that happened today was witnessed by the clan leader. The clan leader has seen everything that happened today. Even if it wasn't for me, he would have done something to make you join the Xiao clan. The expression on Xiao Yan's face was involuntarily startled when he heard this. His eyes were a little erratic as they landed on Xiao Xian. He paused for a moment before suddenly speaking. He paused for a moment and said, Ancestor, do you really plan to stay here? At this moment, Xiao Yan did not have even the slightest good impression of this so-called clan. If it was not on account of Xiao Xian, he would have long since left. However, after the matter with Xiao Feng, Xiao Yan could tell that Xiao Xian seemed to have already adopted an attitude of acknowledging the current Xiao clan. Just this point alone caused Xiao Yan to have no choice but to change the way he looked at the Xiao clan. In response, Xiao Xian smiled faintly and said, Don't worry. You are saying this because of what happened during the day, right? Xiao Yan did not comment. However, Xiao Xian shook his head nonchalantly and said with a smile, Haha. Haha, you little brat. Xiao clan is one of the 3 great clans. How could they be as tyrannical as what you saw today? What you saw was merely what others wanted you to see.
Moreover, Xiao Xian suddenly paused at the end of his words. He slowly lifted his head and stared at Xiao Yan.
His tone was a little deep as he said, "You didn't come here to the central region. You did not come to the middle region just for the Xiao clan and me. I believe that you are already aware of the relationship between the Ghost Temple Gate and the Ghost Temple Gate. If you wish to rescue your wife from their hands, it is impossible for you to do so by yourself.
I believe that you know this better than anyone else."
Sun Air. Xiao Yan's body suddenly trembled violently at the mention of Sun Air. His expression instantly turned gloomy. A terrifying murderous intent surged in his originally calm heart at this moment. Even the aura in his body uncontrollably surged out. Chapter 1389. Hence, given the current situation, the Xiao clan's help is indispensable if we want to fight against the ghost sect. Xiao Xian pondered for a moment before continuing. We do not know the foundation of the ghost sect, but since it can surpass the three great clans, it is not difficult to imagine its strength.
As for the Ghost Temple sect, it is one of the four great factions in the Middle region and naturally has no lack of Source Venerate level experts.
Not only that, but they also have two Source Venerate level sect leaders. Xiao Yan's face was dense. At the same time, his body trembled abruptly.
A beautiful face that could cause the downfall of a country, carrying a thread of clear and elegant demeanor, slowly surfaced in his mind.
No matter what, it could not be removed. Little fairy doctor. Xiao Xian could not help but frown slightly upon seeing this. He recalled that he had indeed not seen the little fairy doctor in the ancient hall. Now that he saw the expression on Xiao Yan's face, he immediately had a vague guess in his heart.
In short, as of now, regardless of whether it is the Ghost Gate or the Ghost Slaughter sect, their strength is sufficient to cause us to look up to them.
Between us and them, it is just like fire and water. A true all-out battle is only a matter of time.
Therefore, we must gather sufficient strength before that happens.
Joining the clan is undoubtedly the most effective method. Although you and some of the elders in the clan are prejudiced against each other, we are after all from the same clan.
I believe that they will not stand by and do nothing when it comes to uniting against an external enemy.
The expression on Xiao Yan's face gradually relaxed after hearing Xiao Xian's explanation. After panting for a moment, the killing intent in his chest also gradually calmed down. His eyes once again regained their clarity. He nodded slightly, looked directly at Xiao Xian in front of him and softly said, "Looks like Ancestor is already prepared for this. I do not even have the slightest chance to reject these words." Xiao Xian could only smile in a non-committal manner upon hearing this. He understood Xiao Yan's character quite well.
If he was not prepared, it was likely that the latter would not be willing to join the clan.
After all, blood is thicker than water. We are ultimately from the same clan. It is reasonable for me to do this. If that's the case, I'll find a chance to join the clan too. Xiao Yan smiled and nodded. Although he did not have a good impression of the Xiao clan, he had to join the Xiao clan for Xiao Xian, Sun Air and the little fairy doctor. Haha, that's good too. After today's incident, I'm sure the patriarch side will also make a move. It won't be long. Xiao Xian stood up with a smile. At the same time, he let out a long sigh of relief and relaxed a lot. Quickly following this, however, Xiao Yan's eyebrows suddenly turned.
He appeared to have recalled something as he raised his eyebrows and exclaimed, "Oh right, Bai Hua and Lian are still outside." The two of them were so focused on talking about the Xiao clan that they forgot about Bai Hua and her companion who were blocked by Xiao Li outside the ancient city hall. Now that the matter had come to an end, Xiao Yan suddenly thought of the two of them, but he didn't know how they were doing now. Haha, don't worry. Although Elder Li did not allow them to enter the inner clan, there will be people who will arrange accommodation for them outside the ancient city hall. You don't have to worry about this. Xiao Xian smiled and gestured to Xiao Yan to be at ease. The latter secretly heaved a sigh of relief. But in the next moment, the grandfather and grandson looked at the courtyard outside the door. At this moment, a few figures were hurriedly rushing over in front of the courtyard. The person in front was an elder. Looking at his status, he should be an elder in the Xiao clan. However, there were two young people following closely behind him. Xiao Yan looked over and saw that they were Bai Hua and Lian. Seeing this scene, the two of them immediately raised their eyebrows. It was really a coincidence.
They did not expect that they would arrive here just as they spoke. Xiao Yan and Lian quickly looked at each other when they saw the three people walking over. Then, they quickly stepped forward to welcome them. The elder immediately smiled when he saw this. Haha, Elder Xiao Xian, I have been instructed by Elder Li to send these two to you. Bai Hua and Lian quickly moved to Xiao Yan's side as he spoke. Then, they looked at the elder in front of them and quickly bowed to thank him. Thank you, Elder. Xiao Xian's eyes swept across Bai Hua and Lian. Then, he quickly looked at the elder in front of him. He did not dare to slight him and immediately cupped his hands together to thank him. However, he frowned in the next moment and suddenly lifted his head. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at the elder in front of him. He said in a strange voice, Elder Tang, you just said. Haha, you did not hear wrongly. From today onwards, you will be the inner sect elder of the Xiao clan. In the future, I will have to rely on you. The elder laughed softly when he saw the strange expression on Xiao Xian's face. Then he said in a mocking tone. At the same time, a surprised expression surfaced on Xiao Xian's face. Although he had already expected the result of his battle with Xiao Feng, he did not expect it to lead to such an outcome. There was never a lack of elder positions in the Xiao clan. Across the entire Xiao clan, there were at least 100 people who held the position of elder. However, these people only held the position in name. They didn't wield any power or benefits. Among these elders, there were also the inner pavilion elders. These people were the true managers of the Xiao clan. Xiao Xian did not expect that his battle would raise his status to such a level. Xiao Xian's heart did not rejoice because of this. Instead, he felt an invisible pressure. After all, regardless of whether it was his status or identity, he would not be welcomed by anyone in the clan. Adding Xiao Yan, it was likely that they would face even greater trouble in the clan in the future. In addition, young friend Xiao Yan, the clan leader, has specially instructed that from today onwards, you will be treated the same as the crown prince in the clan. Tomorrow, the clan will set up a separate residence for the two of you. Someone will also send the monthly allowance to the two of you. The old man sized up Xiao Yan in front of him. At the same time that a glint flashed deep within his old eyes, the smile on his old face also became denser. Thank you, elder. Haha, young friend, you are too polite. I am Xiao Qingtang. If you need anything in the future, feel free to look for me. As long as it is within my ability, I will not be stingy. The elder cupped his fists together politely. After a chuckle, he did not stay any longer. He turned around and walked out of the door. In the end, he disappeared from the sight of Xiao Yan and the others. Xiao Yan clapped his hands as he watched Xiao Qingtang leave. He smiled and said to Bai Hua and the other girl beside him, Are the two of you all right? The two of them smiled and shook their heads. After confirming that they were fine, they followed Xiao Xian's guidance and found a room to rest in. Chapter 1390. The silver moon hung high in the night sky. Faint moonlight scattered down from the night sky like a huge silver veil that covered the entire Xiao clan. Xiao Yan was seated on the top floor of the pavilion. Both of his eyes were tightly shut. Both of his hands formed a seal and formed a training seal. Following the circulation of his breathing, threads of energy that were visible to the naked eye drifted out from the surrounding empty space. Finally, following his breathing, the energy continuously entered his body. It was a long while later before the energy drifting around his body gradually slowed down. Xiao Yan's eyelashes trembled slightly. A moment later, he opened his eyes and exhaled the turbid air that had been suppressed in his chest. His entire body had also recovered to its peak state in an instant. Although the continuous journey and the battle with Xiao Chuhang today did not consume too much of his strength, it still caused him to feel even more exhausted. Only at this moment did his originally dark yellow complexion once again recover its rosy color. His pair of eyes seemed to be wrapped in a layer of faint warm jade in the dark night, and it was rather strange. Xiao clan, I hope that we will not disappoint the choice of our ancestor. A glint flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes as he muttered in a somewhat dense tone. Immediately, he lifted his head and looked at the dark sky in front of him. High up in the night sky, the stars were boundless. A bright moon hung in the horizon, emitting a bright moonlight. Although it was night time, the scene on the ground below could be seen clearly. Although it was not as bright as daytime, there was a different feeling to it. Xiao Yan was a little absent-minded as he looked at the night sky. In a trance, those stars seemed to outline a peerless beauty that could topple a country. Her curving smile caused one to have endless fanciful thoughts. Sun Er. Memories of the past continuously flashed across his mind. Everything that had happened in the past seemed to have happened yesterday. However, Xiao Yan did not dare to imagine Sun Er's current situation.
He was afraid that the longing in his heart would cause everything to turn into the most brutal killing intent in an instant.
Ghost Palace, it is all your fault. Also, as dense killing intent surged in his heart, Xiao Yan suddenly flipped his palm. A palm-sized, emerald green ancient jade appeared in Xiao Yan's palm. It was the Tu Shi ancient god's jade. Both of his eyes stared at the ancient jade in his palm. The hatred in Xiao Yan's heart grew even denser. His 5 curled fingers wished that he could crush the ancient jade. In the end, all of this happened because of this. Sigh. After a long while, Xiao Yan finally sighed with a bitter face. With a flip of his palm, he once again stored the ancient jade into his storage ring. No matter how much resentment he had in his heart, the Tu Shi was his most important bargaining chip to save Sun Er. Any impulse. After being quiet for a moment, Xiao Yan shook his head violently. He threw out the distracting thoughts in his heart and once again entered his cultivation state. Currently, the Ghost Gate was still a rather distant existence to him. Rather than being deeply worried about this, it was better to focus all of his thoughts on how to raise his own strength. That was the most important thing. Even if he wanted to save someone, the prerequisite was that he needed to have sufficient strength to support it. The next day, when Xiao Yan walked down from the pavilion, Bai Hua and Lian Er, who were surrounding the table in the hall, immediately shot their gazes over. Both parties looked at each other and smiled.
Immediately after, a wave of light footsteps in the courtyard outside the door attracted the gazes of the 3 people.
When the 3 of them looked over, the person who had arrived was Xiao Mingyuan, 3rd elder. Xiao Yan hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. Behind him, Bai Hua and Lian Er followed closely behind. Haha, little fellow, we meet again. I believe that you are already aware of the matter that the clan leader announced yesterday, right? Xiao Mingyuan chuckled as he swept his gaze over the 3 people in front of him. There was no need to say much about Xiao Yan in front of him. However, after sweeping his gaze over by Hua and Lian Er behind him, his eyebrows twitched. A surprised expression involuntarily surfaced in his old eyes. Fortunately, he did not reveal too much of it. Xiao Yan smiled and nodded when he heard this. Soon after, he saw Xiao Mingyuan take off a storage ring from his finger and handed it over. This is your monthly allowance. Other than this month's allowance, there are also all of the monthly allowances for the past 2 years. As for the rest, you can count them yourself. Looking at the storage ring in front of him, Xiao Yan received it without any hesitation. If it was yesterday, he would definitely not accept it so easily. However, since he was already willing to join the Xiao clan, this monthly allowance should belong to him. Naturally, there was no need to hesitate. The expression in Xiao Mingyuan's eyes immediately brightened when he saw this. He more or less understood Xiao Yan's character. Xiao Yan did not open his mouth to agree to the powerful invitation of the Xiao clan yesterday. Naturally, it was impossible for him to happily accept this little monthly allowance. It was likely that something had happened last night. Xiao Mingyuan's heart immediately thought of Xiao Xian. That's right, where is Xiao Xian? He doesn't seem to be here. Given Xiao Mingyuan's current cultivation, he had already sensed that Xiao Xian was not here when he entered the pavilion. Ancestor went to the back mountain to train. A light flashed in Xiao Yan's eyes as he said nonchalantly. Although it was called training, it was actually to refine the last half fragment of the origin returning art. If his luck was not bad, perhaps Xiao Xian's cultivation would be able to step into the origin sect after he finished refining this half fragment. At that time, Xiao Yan wanted to see what kind of expression those arrogant elders of the Xiao clan would have on their faces. Oh, is that so? Yesterday, I saw the might of his 2 types of Grand Dao energy, and I'm still unsatisfied. I originally wanted to spar with him and perhaps he would be able to provide me with some guidance in the Grand Dao energy. But since it's like this, then forget it.
The old man smiled mockingly as he looked at the stunned expressions on the faces of the 3 people in front of him. Soon after, his tone changed and he said again, "All right. Since you are staying in the clan now, perhaps you can try to participate in the clan gathering in half a year's time.
The clan gathering includes the best of the younger generation in most of the clans. Although it may not be attractive to you, the rewards of the gathering are quite tempting. First place will receive 20 top-grade spirit stones.
At the end of his words, Xiao Mingyuan's tone was deliberately a little more serious, and the so-called reward for first place unsurprisingly caused the expressions of the three people in front of him to instantly change.
20 top-grade spirit stones. The corner of Xiao Yan's eyes twitched involuntarily when he heard these words. He recalled that back then, he had borrowed the 2 top-tier spirit stones that Xiao Jin had given him to raise his cultivation by 3 stars. One could imagine just what kind of enormous amount of training resources these 20 top-tier spirit stones were. Chapter 1391. After Xiao Mingyuan left, Xiao Yan and the other two were still surprised by the reward for the first place that he had mentioned earlier. Even Lian, who always seemed ignorant, could not help but reveal a heated expression on her slightly childish face. A total of 20 top-grade spirit stones. If placed in the outside world, it would be enough to create a second-rate sect. Its influence could not be said to be small. If it could land in the hands of Xiao Yan and the rest. Looking at Bai Hua and Lian by the side, Xiao Yan's heart was slightly moved. Although his strength had continuously increased during this period of time, they had not been stagnant either. With Bai Hua's physique, her current cultivation had already reached the level of a 7-star origin king. Moreover, there were faint signs of breaking through to the 8-star level. Lian Er's cultivation speed was incomparably shocking. The terrifying physique of the woeful poison body was completely displayed on her body. Her cultivation had also reached the level of a 4-star origin king. In addition to Bai Hua's daily training and the woeful poison body, this girl's combat strength could be considered quite extraordinary within the origin king realm. According to this training speed, Xiao Yan was confident that he would be able to raise the strength of the two of them to the Yuan Zone class within a year if he added the 20 top-tier spirit stones. What happened? Why are all of you standing here? Just as Xiao Yan and the other two were in a daze, Xiao Xian had unknowingly entered the courtyard. He took a few steps forward and looked at the three in front of him with a somewhat puzzled gaze. The moment Xiao Xian's words left his mouth, the three of them immediately returned to their senses and shook their heads. Only then did they roughly explain the matter of Xiao Mingyuan's visit. Naturally, this included the so-called clan gathering. Oh, clan gathering, huh? Looking at the time, it is indeed almost time. If there is a chance, all of you should give it a try. There will be no harm. Even if you are not ranked, the clan will still give some rewards. Of course, if you are able to obtain a ranking, that will undoubtedly be the best. Seeing the fiery expression on Lianer's face, Xiao Xian could not help but smile.
However, the words that came out of his mouth caused the three of them to frown.
Us? Among the three of us, only Xiao Yan is a member of the Xiao clan. I'm afraid that Lianer and I don't have the qualifications to participate in such a grand occasion, right? Bai Hua and Lian looked at each other and said hesitantly. Haha, you don't have to worry about this. If it was in the past, perhaps you wouldn't be able to participate in such a clan gathering. But now, as the elder of the Xiao clan's inner cabinet, I still have some authority. In addition, with Xiao Yan around, I believe there won't be any problem. Xiao Xian smiled and waved his hand. He did not take this matter to heart. Seeing this, Bai Hua and Lian nodded and smiled. Bright light flickered in their eyes. Xiao Yan also felt a little excited in his heart. Honestly speaking, he was also quite curious about Xiao Feng's strength. Yesterday, he had seen Xiao Feng use the Wind God's Fury, which was extremely powerful. He wondered what his chances of victory would be if he were to face Xiao Feng head-on with his current strength. I wonder how much my strength has increased in half a year. Gently clenching his fist, the expression in Xiao Yan's eyes gradually became determined. Soon after, the few of them chatted for a while before taking their seats one after another. As for the rules of the clan meeting, they are all clichés, so I don't have to say much about them. Someone will introduce them to you at the time, so I believe you don't have to worry too much about the rest. Remember, the purpose of the clan meeting is not for the rewards, but for the hope that you can gain rich experience through more actual battles. Therefore, you just have to do your best in the competition, and put yourself first. I believe that with your talent, as long as you cultivate in peace for the next half a year, it won't be a difficult thing to achieve results in the clan meeting. Bai Hua and Lian immediately nodded their heads when they heard this. A heated expression flashed across their faces. This caused Xiao Yan to feel a little helpless when he saw this. These two fellows had actually become like this after hearing about the reward of 20 top-grade spirit stones. This really caused one to be unable to laugh or cry. However, if one thought about it carefully, one would understand. A top-grade spirit stone was something that one could only encounter but not seek in the outside world. Its value was immeasurable. Now that they had such an opportunity, it was naturally unavoidable for their hearts to be excited. However, they seemed to have forgotten that the top-grade spirit stone reward could only be obtained by the final victor of the clan gathering. That's right. I wonder if the ancestors' cultivation method has been successfully refined? Xiao Yan recovered. Only then did he recall the return to source skill. Immediately, he hurriedly inquired. The latter smiled bitterly and shook his head when he heard this. He slowly replied. The refinement was naturally a success, but my cultivation did not break through as smoothly as I had expected. The stagnation this time has indeed affected my cultivation. I'm afraid that it won't be easy for me to break through to the origin ancestor stage. Xiao Xian felt somewhat helpless in this regard.
According to the nature of the returnance art, he should have used this opportunity to break through to the origin ancestor stage in one go. However, after refining the remnant portion of the cultivation method, he faintly sensed the barrier that should not have existed, the barrier to the origin ancestor stage.
How can this be? The moment these words were spoken, Xiao Yan immediately frowned as surprise surfaced on his face.
Based on his understanding of the returnance art, it was impossible for one to encounter a bottleneck before reaching the peak of every cultivation method.
However, Xiao Xian had encountered such a situation at the peak of the origin emperor stage. This was truly unexpected. It might be because the third scroll is incomplete. However, it's fine. Since there's a bottleneck, I'll just break through it. There's nothing to worry about. On the other hand, you need the help of a heavenly flame to raise your strength. Do you know where to find the other two heavenly flames? Xiao Yan helplessly shook his head when he heard this. Even Yi Honglian did not know where the other two heavenly flames were, so how would he know? The only thing he could be sure of was that they were in the central region. However, the continent was so vast that even in the central region, wanting to find the whereabouts of the heavenly flames was no different from finding a needle in a haystack. It was also at this moment that Xiao Yan suddenly recalled what Huazhu had said to him back at the Heavenly Cloud Villa. Based on that, the ancestor of the Pill Tower seemed to know where the heavenly flames were located in the central region. If he had no other choice, this might become a clue that he could not ignore. A bright light flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes when he thought of this. Xiao Xian could not help but smile when he saw this. He had some guesses in his heart. Soon after, he seemed to have thought of something. With a flip of his hand, the storage ring on his finger flickered slightly. Soon after, two spirit stones that emitted a rich energy aura appeared in his hand. When the three of them looked over, their expressions suddenly hardened. There was no doubt that these were two top-tier spirit stones. Chapter 1392. Although I have saved up some spiritual stones over the past few years, most of them have been used up. These two are useless to me, so I'll give them to you first. Xiao Xian chuckled and flicked his finger. The two spiritual stones flew to Bai Hua and Lian, respectively. The two hesitated for a moment, glanced at Xiao Yan, and then respectfully received them. Haha, half a year's time is neither long nor short. These two spiritual stones are the only things I can help you with. You will have to rely on yourselves for the rest. The clan meeting is not as cruel as a real battle, but it is definitely not an easy task. You should treat it seriously. Hearing this, everyone, including Xiao Yan, nodded heavily. Then Bai Hua and Lian, each went upstairs with the spiritual stones in their hands. Xiao Yan then took out the storage ring that Xiao Mingyuan had given to him and slowly said, "There are some spiritual stones here. Aside from some elixirs and medial spiritual stones, there are also 10 supreme-grade spiritual stones. They were given by the third elder." Yes, it's within my expectations. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given them the two spiritual stones. Xiao Xian smiled faintly and did not mind. He had encountered such means when he first entered the Xiao clan. Now that he saw it again, he was naturally not surprised. The reason why he did not want Bai Hua and Lianer to know about the 10 spiritual stones was that he did not want them to place their hopes on external things. Although supreme-grade spiritual stones could help them quickly increase their cultivation, if they could not truly grasp this power, even if they obtained it, they would not be able to use it. Instead, It was better to let them feel the urgency of time. Under pressure, their potential would be stimulated. Xiao Yan was naturally able to understand the meaning behind Xiao Xian's words. Soon after, his thoughts once again returned to the Spirit Stone. Then these 10 supreme-grade spiritual stones. Naturally, it is not a monthly allowance. Although there are many supreme-grade spiritual stones in the clan, it is not to the point of being rich. Even the Crown Prince has to make a certain contribution to the clan if he wants to obtain supreme-grade spiritual stones. However, that level of contribution is unattainable. Otherwise, the clan meeting would not be the place that many disciples yearn for. Hearing this, Xiao Yan secretly nodded. In other words, the Xiao clan had put in a lot of effort in order to rope him in. Xiao Yan's eyes stared intently at the storage ring in his hand. Many thoughts flowed within his heart. It was a moment later before he finally put it away. He lifted his eyes and exchanged a smile with Xiao Xian on the opposite side. A bright light flowed within his deep, dark black eyes. After the incident with Xiao Feng, Xiao Xian and Xiao Yan's status in the Xiao clan had changed instantly. This also caused some people who did not have a good impression of the grandfather and grandson duo to stop in their tracks and forcefully suppress the thought of finding trouble with them. This also allowed Xiao Yan to enjoy an extremely rare period of leisure in the following days. This made him, who was used to being pressed for time, feel a little uneasy. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Xiao Xian was still trying to break through the barrier to the Source Sect. However, due to the Returnance art, he was still far from achieving a result. Fortunately, given Xiao Xian's temperament, he did not care about this. After all, the Returnance art had been completely restored. No matter how slow the process was, it was only a matter of time before he broke through. On the other side, Bai Hua and Lian Er had already entered a retreat. From the looks of it, they held an extremely great attitude toward the clan gathering.
From the looks of the waves of energy ripples that were occasionally emitted from their rooms, the training of the both of them had improved during this half a month.
This caused the emotions in Xiao Yan's heart to become a little fiery hot. Are these two fellows about to break through again?
Xiao Yan raised his head and looked at the room where the two of them were in.
His mouth involuntarily sighed.
The physiques of these two fellows were different from an ordinary person.
Their training speed was something that others could only hope to catch up with.
It was really difficult to imagine just what level their cultivation would reach once they completely absorbed and refined this top-tier spirit stone.
Xiao Yan exhaled somewhat helplessly. He placed the teacup down with one hand. When he turned around, he suddenly frowned and looked outside the door. At this moment, a familiar old man's figure was looking at him with a face full of smiles. Surprisingly, it was Xiao Mingyuan. Third Elder, I haven't seen you for a long time. Your body looks much stronger. At the same time as he stood up, Xiao Yan cupped his hands respectfully toward Xiao Mingyuan. The latter laughed out loud, waved his hand, and laughed out loud. You little brat, don't flatter me. How are you? Have you gotten used to these days? Thank you for your concern, Third Elder. I've been doing well. I've clearly built a villa for you, but you still want to live here. If it was someone else, I'm afraid they would have already moved over with their belongings. Little brat, you're really different. Hearing this, Xiao Yan smiled non-committally. He did not care much about those things. Moreover, Bai Hua and Lianer were currently in seclusion, so he naturally could not leave. Xiao Xian is not here again. Looking at the empty pavilion, Xiao Mingyuan's eyes flickered slightly.
At the same time, he seemed to have understood something in his heart.
No wonder you don't want to leave. Third Elder, are you looking for the ancestor?
Xiao Yan pursed his lips and said with a smile.
No, I'm not looking for him. I'm looking for you. Randomly pointing at Xiao Yan, Xiao Mingyuan took 2 steps forward and sat on the chair.
Immediately, he lifted his head and looked at Xiao Yan in front of him with a faint smile.
Me. Hearing this, Xiao Yan's expression was a little surprised. He did not understand what was going on.
The old man parted his mouth and said with a smile, The First Elder has come out of seclusion.
He wants to see you. First Elder. Xiao Yan's heart suddenly jumped when Xiao Mingyuan's voice sounded. The expression on his face could not help but change. The First Elder of the Xiao clan was the second person in power after the clan leader, Xiao Yuheng. He was also the true expert of the Xiao clan. Now, this person who could decide whether he stayed or left was finally going to see him. Phew! Third elder, please lead the way. Xiao Yan focused his attention and once again turned his gaze to Xiao Mingyuan.
Hearing this, the latter shrugged his shoulders and laughed dryly. Don't worry.
I have other matters to attend to and can't bring you there. I originally planned to let Xiao Xian lead the way for you.
However, since he is not here, I'm afraid you can only go by yourself.
Hearing this, Xiao Yan was speechless. The Xiao clan was so big.
It was difficult for him to go out and find an old man whom he had never seen before.
Seeing Xiao Yan's difficult expression, Xiao Mingyuan chuckled and teased. Hey, kid. Why didn't I see such an expression when you barged into the Xiao clan alone? Don't worry, the first elder lives alone in the depths of the back mountain. As long as you follow the stone stairs to the end, you will reach his residence. He will be waiting for you there this evening. Remember, he will not wait for you there.